on the table where you are sitting.
Well, if it's like my house, we'll just leave it there for the next 30 years, then it'll be rediscovered under a pile of papers.
I think it only has 14 more years to go, so.
That's how we sort of found it when we went to renovate City Hall. We found it under the sofa in the former city clerk's office. It was under.
Well, yeah, it was there when I started, and so we put it somewhere safe.
And then we renovated, and then we put it in the fireproof safe. We didn't know it was there for the longest time.
Are you sure it's City Hall and not the high school one that's still missing and never found?
It's definitely marked.
Oh, it's always been found. Okay, you guys, we are live streaming right now, so the public is with us. If we would like to get started, we can do that at any time.
All right, it is 7:30, and in fact, we can get started. Welcome to everyone to our Monday, August 9th, 2021 meeting of the Falls Church City Council. This is a regular meeting, and we are so happy and pleased you're able to join us. Madam Clerk, would you please read the meeting notice?
I will. This meeting is being held pursuant to and in compliance with the Virginia Freedom of Information Act, Section 2.2-3708.2, and state and local legislation adopted to allow for continued government operation during the COVID-19 declared emergency. All participating members of City Council are present at this meeting through electronic means, and members of the public are welcome to view the meeting at fallschurchva.gov/council meetings and on the FCC TV, Cox 11, RCN 2, and Verizon 35, and on the city's YouTube channel. Public comments are accepted virtually by those who sign up to speak via the meeting video platform. The sign-up sheet is available at fallschurchva.gov/public comment, and fill out that form before noon on the day of the council meeting. Written public comments, including those regarding public hearings sent in advance of the meeting, will be accepted at cityclerk@fallschurchva.gov. Messages may also be sent to that address at any time. They are sent to the City Council daily and summarized and presented during the written comments agenda item. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Will you please call roll?
Yes, I will. Thank you. Ms. Conley?
Here.
Mr. Duncan?
Here.
Ms. Hardy?
Here.
Mr. Lichtenhouse?
Here.
Ms. Shantz Hiscott?
Here.
Mr. Snyder?
Here.
And Mayor Tarter?
Here.
Thank you, Council.
Thank you. And now on to the Pledge of Allegiance. If you would all please rise wherever you might be and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Maybe we can put up the flags on the screen. There they go. So again, please rise and join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, and before I move on to public comments and written public comments, some sad news I'll pass along. Doug Fraser, longtime city official, city employee, and the building official for the city has passed away. And so I wonder if we might start tonight's meeting with just a moment of silence for him and for his family as well. All right, thank you. And I hope as time goes on, we can find a more fitting and appropriate way to honor him and his service to our community. Madam Clerk, will you please read the summary of written comments?
There.
You're muted again.
Okay, I will not touch that again. Written comments for this evening. Andrew Olison provided comments regarding pedestrian safety for Founders Row 2. Irene Chambers, president of the board of the Tinner Hill Heritage Foundation, wrote in support of the city funding the foundation's mural project. Patrick Fleming asked if City Council had considered either not accepting federal relief funds or accepting them and gifting them to another community in need. Heather Henry wrote to oppose spending funds on automobile speed reduction. Carol Luton submitted 2 proposals on behalf of herself and several other residents for spending federal relief funds. One proposal is entitled Music in Falls Church City, and the other entitled Reimagining the Charles Ellsworth Gage House. And then the Urban Forestry Commission provided comments on the One City Center conceptual design. And that was it.
There, you're muted.
Sorry, it was really good what I just said. We're going to move on to receipt of public comments. I would ask those who are going to speak, if you could state your name and address for the record and keep your comments to 3 minutes so that we can get through our busy agenda tonight. So Madam Clerk, with that, could you call our first speaker?
Yes, we have Stephanie Oppenheimer.
All right, welcome, Ms. Oppenheimer. Are you here?
Okay, yes, sorry. Sounds like I'm working now. So hello and good evening, Mayor Tarter and members of City Council. My name is Stephanie Oppenheimer. I live at 610 North Oak Street, and I wanted to comment on the work you are doing to consider using some of the proposed ARPA funds to cover the cost of reducing residential speed limits from 25 to 20, pursuant to the new state code that gives local governments that authority. In short, I am in full support. And specific to tonight's budget amendment discussion, I am also in full support of providing the necessary funding to execute that change by replacing the speed limit signs. My support comes as a result of my experience of living, working, and raising 2 children in communities in Virginia that were built long before the concept of planned communities and infrastructures became more commonplace. First in historic Alexandria, and now in Falls Church City. I have spent the entirety of my adult years in residential neighborhoods that feature narrow, winding streets, sidewalks that are often on only one side of the street or don't exist at all, World War II era homes that were built without garages and require residents to park on the street, and business and residential densities that, if our roads were safer, would make these communities ideal for walking, cycling, and utilizing other forms of transportation and helping reduce our environmental impact. Our current street shares its address with Mount Daniel Elementary School, and school buses and parents regularly drive up and down the street to drop off or pick up their K through 2nd graders. With our city sharing borders with Fairfax and Arlington counties, I think our situation is far from unique in that we have 4 bus stops within a 2-block range of our home, serving a total of 7 schools in 2 different school districts. A speed limit of 25 is too fast for our residential streets, and there have been too many close calls between drivers and those walking, cycling, or skateboarding. Making an effort to slow down drivers and providing the needed funding are actions I feel we should be wise to take. I fully support dropping the speed limit to 20 on our residential streets. I fully support providing the funding to execute that change, and I thank you for your tireless work serving our community. Thank you and good night.
All right, thank you so much. We appreciate that. Madam Clerk, our next speaker.
Yes, we have Nikki Graves Henderson.
All right, welcome. Nikki, are you there? Do we show her on the?
We spoke before. I think we can go to the next speaker. Maybe she's dropped off and we can catch her after Tori McKinney is also signed up this evening.
All right. Miss McKinney, Tori, welcome. Tori, before you get too far, you're muted.
I too said something very important.
I thought so. I thank you for the kind words, Tori. I appreciate that.
Thank you so much for having me tonight, Mayor and City Council. I'm here tonight to talk about Tinder Hill Music Festival that's coming up in 12 days. And I'm trying not to hyperventilate because we only have 12 days to get it all together, but we're really getting close. I also want to thank the city for the partnership with the foundation and all the resources you're sharing with us and your flexibility in working with us. We're really excited for August 21st. The festival runs from 11 a.m. to 9 p.m. So with that, I'm going to just explain a little bit about the festival and then see if you guys have any questions. So like I said, it starts from 11 to 9. Gates are at 11 a.m. and we have music starting at gates through 8:30 p.m. with a little room for an encore. And our lineup includes Rocknoceros for kids. And we have a junior steel drum band, a youth steel drum band. Then we have a local musician, Eric Scott, followed by 2 regional/local bands, Vintage Number 18 and the Twin Brothers Band. And our headliners, we have 3 co-headliners. We have Junior Marvin and the Legendary Wailers. Junior Marvin was Bob Marley's guitarist back in the day. So he's it's really special to have him. And he played in 2019. And then we have Bonorama, one of my favorites. It's a funk rock band from New Orleans, and it's headed by 5 trombonists. So it's a pretty exciting sound, and I hope you all enjoy it. And then we finish off with B.B. King's Blues Experience, which is his daughter's project, B.B. King's daughter's project, and they're touring with Michael Lee of The Voice. So we'll all be in it for a treat with him. And then within the festival, we have villages, interactive villages. So we have a kids village. We have a relaxation village with massages and yoga in the park. And then we have the food village with local restaurants. This year we have Liberty Barbecue. We have Bad Pizza. We have Jambalaya Brothers food truck, which is New Orleans fare. And then we have an ice cream truck and a shaved ice truck. And we're talking to Lebanese Taverna to firm them up. So it should be a nice menu. And then the beer garden, and it's sponsored by myself. And we have all 3 breweries participating, the 2 city breweries, Solace Outpost and Audacious Ale Works, along with Settle Down Easy. Settle Down Easy spearheaded a collaborative brewing with Solace and Audacious, and they have brewed the Rockstar Red Ale. It's been tapped and it's actually canned, so you can buy it for retail at either of the 3 breweries. And then we also have Falls Church Distillers, which will be serving up 2 of their cocktails, the Bourbon Lemonade and the Tart Cherry Mule. So, and then we'll have wine as well. So we have an enhanced backstage sponsor experience, which City Council will be able to preview for our 2:00 festival toast on Saturday the 21st. And activities going on in the Kids Village, as well as our Artist Village, and we have local artists who will be selling their creations. So that's the festival, and I invite City Council to attend, along with our city employees and our teachers. We are offering a BOGO, buy one get one free, and that is hold on one second. Okay, I don't have the direct link for local TV, but I will get that over to City Hall. So all city employees and all teachers can buy one ticket and get one free. And tickets are $35 at the gate.
I think that means you're over your 3 minutes, Tori.
I finished.
All right. Good job. Good job. Well, listen, that sounds like an exciting and fun day with music. So we appreciate you organizing, and sounds like a lot of fun. So we'll be there.
Just want to add, all net proceeds from the festival benefit the Tinner Hill Heritage Foundation.
All right. Well, thank you much. And like I said, sounds like fun. We'll see you there.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Who's up next, Celeste?
I believe that Nikki Henderson is with us now.
Oh.
All right. Are you there?
I'm here.
All right.
Can you hear me?
We can. We can.
Great, great. I'm Nikki Graves Henderson, and I live at 307 South Maple Avenue, and I've been working with Tinner Hill since 2005. I am currently the director of the Tinner Hill Historic Mural District Project. And I wanted to remind all of you that I think just about everybody has heard about the mural project. And I wanted to let you know that we have begun the project. We've identified potentially 20 some odd plus walls on businesses throughout the Tinner Hill Historic District, beginning on Annandale Road and going through to on Lee Highway / South Washington to the edge of the city that, as you well know, is the most diverse area of the city and has the potential for being one of the most creative, fun, attractive areas of the city. There are more diverse businesses and more mom and pop businesses, with the exception of Target. Most of the businesses along that corridor are small, minority-owned or ethnic-owned businesses. And we believe that art connects communities. And it's not just a feel-good effort on the council's part or businesses' part, but it pays for itself in the long run. People have learned through trial and error that murals attract foot traffic. Foot traffic attracts people to businesses. And without exception, those people spend money in our city. It benefits the businesses, it benefits our city tax base. So we have begun fundraising. We've been planning this project for approximately the last 3 years. We have raised just over $20,000. And before the pandemic, we had spoken with the council and got their support. And at that time, we're told that if we raised a certain amount of money, that the council would match that amount. And we're hoping that at this point, the council will at least give us what we have raised in excess of $20,000. And that not only that is important, but to stand behind the project. It looks much better when we go to other funding sources and say that we are supported by our city, not only by words, but with financial support.
And that was the 3 minutes.
Thank you. I think that's your the time, but we, I think, understand fully the request and appreciate all the great work you all have done throughout the city. So thank you so much. We'll be considering it later this evening, and thank you for putting your input in it, and again, the great work you all do. So let's go on. Is there anyone else who's going to be speaking tonight, Celeste?
No, those were our 3 speakers tonight.
All right, let's move on then to council requests. Are there any council requests? We do have a busy agenda tonight. All right, I don't see any. Should we go on to the report of the city manager? Mr. Shields?
Thank you, Mayor Tarter, members of council. Council had asked earlier if we could get a briefing from Fairfax Health, and we've invited Colin Brody, who's the emergency manager for the Department of Fairfax Health, and he is here with us tonight to provide the council with an update on the vaccination effort, the Delta variant, and guidance and directives that are coming from the health department, both federally, state, and local. Mr. Brody, thank you so much for joining us, and so I'll turn over the manager's report to Mr. Brody.
All right, welcome, and thank you for joining us once again. We appreciate your work.
Thank you all for having me. I will be doing my briefing verbally tonight, so I'll provide some remarks off the top, and then I'm happy to answer any questions that you all may have. So it's been a little bit since I was last with you. I'm going to divide these comments into 3 parts. The first is an epidemiology update on where we stand in the Fairfax Health District as a whole. Over the past 7 days, we have averaged 120 new cases per day. And that's, again, inclusive of Fairfax County, Fairfax City, and the city of Falls Church, as well as the towns of Herndon and Vienna. This transmission, based on CDC metrics, puts us in what is called a substantial category of transmission, and that is based on a 7-day rolling average of 70.9 cases per 100,000 residents. What has become clear is that the average age of cases is going down. So last week, the large majority of cases, 186, were in the 20 to 39-year-old age group. 137 were in the 40 to 59 age group. 117 were in those who are under the age of 19. 53 cases were in those who are ages 60 to 79. And 6 cases were in those 80 and up. And so this points to a couple of different factors at play here, which we'll talk about in a minute, as it relates to vaccination and those who are eligible or electing to receive the vaccine. But there is no doubt that since the vaccine has rolled out and the vaccination campaign has begun and picked up a lot of steam, we are beginning to see more cases in those who are younger. Specifically in Falls Church, there have been 436 cases since the start of the pandemic. Moving quickly to vaccinations in the health district, we are exceeding the federal goals. So we have 76.8% of people who are ages 18 and older that have received at least one dose of vaccine. That amounts to 64.6% of all Fairfax Health District residents have received one dose. 70% of those 18 and older are fully vaccinated. And that, when you take into account all of our residents, is 58.5% of all of our residents are fully vaccinated. We publish on our dashboard a breakdown of vaccination rates by age group, broken down roughly into every 5 to 6 years. And so that data is available on our website. But generally speaking, as you move up in the age cohorts, once you get above age 35, the numbers increase, the percentage increases as you get closer to the 85 and older age bracket. So we are looking at novel ways, and we continue to engage with our school systems on ways to make vaccination in younger populations easier. I want to talk a little bit about breakthrough data and breakthrough cases. There's been a lot of media attention on breakthrough cases and what they are. So to speak broadly about where we stand in the United States, more than 99.99% of those who are fully vaccinated have not had a severe breakthrough case of COVID-19. So while there is media interest in fully vaccinated people who become severely ill, it's important to note that when you look at the numbers overall, 99.99% of those who are fully vaccinated have had no severe breakthrough cases. And that is incredibly important as we talk about breakthrough cases. Here in the northern region of Virginia and VDH, the VDH policy and the recommendation is that we talk about breakthrough cases at a regional level, similar to how we talk about hospital beds and hospital availability. We have a very mobile region, and so breakthrough cases are not based on, or not transmission. It doesn't necessarily occur where the case lives, even though that's how we track cases. So when we look at breakthrough cases, we look at the regional level. For the northern region, 98.6% of all cases of all severities are in people who are not fully vaccinated. 97.9% of hospitalizations are in those who are not fully vaccinated. And 97.95% of deaths are in those who are not fully vaccinated. In total, we have had 747 breakthrough cases. Of those, 28 were hospitalized and 7 have died. When you do the math, that works out to 0.052% of fully vaccinated people who ever developed COVID-19 in Northern Virginia. And so I'm happy to take questions as I get to the end about breakthrough cases, but it is important to note that vaccine remains the single best tool we have to completely turn the tide on this pandemic. And we have that data to share and to support that that statement, not only nationally but here locally as well. Moving on to the Delta variant, which again has received a fair bit of media attention. So data shows that the Delta variant is substantially different from the original version of the coronavirus and other variants that have emerged. The Delta variant was first identified in India. It is much more contagious. It poses more of a risk to those who are unvaccinated, and it spreads roughly more than twice as easy as previous variants. Our current data shows that the vaccines authorized for use in the U.S. offer protection against most variants currently spreading in the U.S., including Delta. So while the Delta variant might cause illness in some people even after they're fully vaccinated, the point of vaccination is to reduce the burden of illness and prevent death, and they are very effective at doing both of those. So while vaccinated people with COVID represent a very small number of transmissions, there is emerging evidence that some vaccinated people can be contagious if they're infected with Delta. And so that's why you're seeing a return of mask recommendations for areas of the country that have substantial or high transmission, which Fairfax Health District is in the substantial category. And so one question we often get is, well, does this mean that the vaccines aren't working as expected? And the answer is a resounding no. Nearly 190 million people in the United States who are fully vaccinated have a very strong degree of protection against the variants, including Delta. And so fully vaccinated people are overwhelmingly avoiding severe illness, hospitalization, and death. And unvaccinated people account for most of the hospitalizations and deaths, not only in the United States at large, but also in Northern Virginia. A couple of other updates on that front. As a result of the increasing transmission in the community, beginning today, the county made a policy decision that all employees and visitors, regardless of vaccination status, are required to wear a mask while they're inside all of Fairfax County facilities to help prevent and stop the spread of COVID-19. In addition, the Fairfax County Board has tasked our county executive with exploring the possibility of making COVID-19 vaccination mandatory for county employees. As of right now, there's been no decision made at the county level, although we have seen anecdotally that employees around the country and even locally here in the National Capital Region have decided to move in that direction. But as of right now, the county has, there's not been a policy decision made. On an upside, happy note, we will have vaccination teams, health department vaccination teams at 2 upcoming events in Falls Church, both the Tinder Hill Music Festival as well as the Taste of Falls Church. And so we appreciate the partnership with the event organizers that we are able to have a little bit of space to provide free vaccine to those who are attending the events. And that vaccine will be Pfizer. So anyone who needs a first dose or is in the window for a second dose, we are more than happy to provide that that vaccine at that event. With that, I will pause, and I'm happy to take any questions or clarify anything that I said previously.
All right, any questions or comments from anyone? Ms. Hardy?
Yes, I have just a couple comments. Colin, thank you for all of that information. I'm Tori McKinney, and I'm the executive producer of the Tinder Hill Music Festival. And I was telling Cindy and Mary Beth earlier, I had developed a protocol back in March for my company where it was like 9 steps before anyone could cross the threshold of any of my clients' homes. Obviously, we're not going to wear booties at the festival, which was one of the steps. But we are adding language to our marketing, to our website, and to our social media that everyone should follow the CDC guidelines. And we're also taking measures within the park, as the park capacity is only going to be about 25%, we're hoping. So there should be plenty of room for people to move around. And all of the tents are open on all 4 sides. They just have a roof to shield from weather. What we are going to do is for sanitizing, all the the Porta-Johns have hand sanitizer in them, but we're adding additional automatic hand sanitizer stations at each of the Porta-Johns, and then one at each of the individual villages, as well as backstage and at the farmhouse for the green room. We will have extra masks at each gate. We're not, obviously, no one really knows what's going to happen in the next 12 days. Is everyone going to have to mask regardless? I know where I am part-time in New Orleans, they're masking inside and outside. So, but I know they're, further off than we are. So with all of that, is there anything you can advise me or guide me on for planning over the next 12 days?
So it sounds like a lot of bases have already been covered, and the fact that the event is outdoors is certainly something that will help mitigate spread. I think at this point, the best thing we can do is really have a collective, unifying set of voices that if you are not vaccinated, now is the time to get vaccinated. Even though 12 days, we're not going to see people be fully vaccinated unless they go out and get a Johnson & Johnson vaccine tonight, they can at least start the process and they can be well on their way. And those who are not fully vaccinated should consider wearing a mask at any point that they're in public. And those who are fully vaccinated are recommended to wear it indoors in all public settings in an area like this where we have substantial transmission. When you're outdoors, social distancing and more increased airflow is certainly going to be helpful for that. So there's no concrete changes or recommendations that we would make from the health department standpoint, other than asking that everybody with an opportunity to speak and use their platform highlight the importance of getting vaccinated.
All right, thank you, Ms. Hardy.
Thank you. Thank you, Colin, for joining us again and for all the continued hard work. And also thank you for the specifics around communicating the rarity of the breakthrough cases, because I do think that's important to combat kind of all the media attention, I think, on the number of cases. So really emphasize that. I did not see anywhere in the Fairfax County Health dashboard on those statistics. So I don't know if that's something that's in progress, but I think that would be really helpful, because right now, as it stands, we just see total number of cases, which obviously is a big, scary 80,000 number. So I think being able to communicate, the 98% of the cases, for example, you're seeing so far is in unvaccinated people, and the hospitalizations, again, is in the high 90s for the unvaccinated. Emphasizing that, I think, will hopefully be a good call to action for anyone still on the fence. So if I could just make that request for both the health department and then as well as the city to be able to communicate that. If we have data for our local city residents, that would be terrific. On that note about kind of driving people to get vaccinated, when I looked at our local data for the city of Falls Church, our 25 to 34 population were the laggards. So in every other age demographic, we were in the high 70s in terms of percent vaccinated, and obviously under 12-year-olds not yet eligible, so excluding them. But the 25 to 34 was really in the mid 60s, so a decent vaccination rate, but obviously not as high as we'd like it to be. What sort of targeted work has worked elsewhere, and then what would you recommend besides kind of those 2 mobile clinics you mentioned in Falls Church?
That's an excellent question. So first, on the to circle back to the point you made about breakthrough infection. So right now, because of the numbers, we VDH at a state level, we're doing reporting breakthrough cases at a regional level. Again, because similar to how we were early in the pandemic, there's transmission that occurs throughout the community. So we're not breaking it down at the granular level. The numbers that I provided were regional, so for Northern Virginia, and we will continue to do that until there's an epidemiologic reason to make it a little more granular, and that would happen at a statewide level. When it comes to the 25 to 34 category, that is an extremely difficult group to not to reach necessarily, but to convince.
If you're not speaking, by the way, if you could mute your computer, I think we're getting a lot of feedback. Anyway, go ahead, please.
Sure. So when we're talking about the 25 to 34 demographic, there's a substantial amount of misinformation and disinformation that is out there. Anecdotally, we know that there's concern around fertility or a perceived lack of fertility if someone were to get vaccinated. And that obviously is of concern for new couples or for individuals who are seeking to become pregnant. And so we are seeing this happen nationally, and there's some work underway to try to put myth-busting information at the eyes of those who are in need of seeing it. The other thing related to the 25 to 34 demographic is that there is sometimes not the ability to make executive plans around vaccination schedules. So we are trying to bring the vaccine closer to those populations wherever they may be. So we're looking at some novel approaches, like coming to events that are music festivals and things like that, to try to catch that demographic while they're otherwise engaged. And then the third thing we're doing is currently in its data collection phase, but we are conducting a small study at our vaccination sites, and it's a study that is designed by our population health and epidemiology unit, and the survey is being given to everyone coming in for first dose. We're just asking them what changed your mind, what made you come and get vaccinated today, August 9th. There's some free text for people to respond with whatever is on their mind, and then there's also an opportunity for them to select from multiple choice. And so we're able to look on the back end as soon as we have enough submissions. We're able to look at that data and figure out where we need to target public messaging to be able to dispel some of the myths and capitalize on the reasons that people are coming in to be vaccinated. So that's not data that we have yet, but it's data that we are actively collecting.
Got it. And my last question. Thank you. My last question is for Mr. Shields and Ms. McCoskrie. I know last time we talked about, similar to what the County Board of Supervisors is really around vaccine mandates. Do we have more information on our authority to do that for both city employees and our contractors?
So in terms of the legal authority to do it, I'll defer to the city attorney. We did, I will just say from a policy perspective, we did take note of the governor's strong recommendation that local governments do enact a mandate. And so we are looking at it very closely. We do anticipate that we will learn also from our colleagues in Fairfax County and other surrounding jurisdictions. And so we do think there's some value also in having such a mandate in a coordinated fashion. So that's just a couple of thoughts on that, but I would defer to the city attorney on it, her legal view of it.
And this is something that the various jurisdictions have been discussing for a little while. I think places that have adopted a mandate have done so and they've called it a mandate, but it isn't that you don't keep your job if you don't get vaccinated. It's really that they put some sorts of additional restrictions on those who have not been vaccinated. I would say ultimately probably the law is not 100% clear because we haven't trod this ground before, but I think that we will have some ability to put some type of requirements on. And as Wyatt said, I think we're trying to work with all the different jurisdictions in the area so that everybody ends up doing the same thing.
Great. Well, I'd be supportive. I think local governments should lead by example. So as we encourage our citizens to do it, I think we should. And I noted that I think Virginia has a date of September 1st. And so if it makes sense for us to be consistent in the region, I'd be supportive of that too. That's it. Thank you.
All right, Vice Mayor Connolly.
Thanks. I think that Mr. Snyder was ahead of me.
Mr. Snyder?
Sure. Thank you very much. I really have three questions for you, Colin. And first of all, I think the health departments have done really an incredible job in so many different areas. So thank you for that. The first question is, do you need additional resources or funding that you don't now have? We're looking at, of course, the federal funding, and priority number one needs to be getting us through this pandemic. So my question is, do you need any funding or resources you don't now have?
Thank you for the question. At the moment, due to the rise in cases that we've seen, we are working to augment our case and contact investigation staff. We are able to do that with existing resources, so we don't anticipate a need for additional funding or resource on that front. And on the vaccine front, as we've all seen, the days of us doing 5,000 vaccines in a Saturday, which is what we were doing in the end of January, February, March. Those days have passed largely because everyone who wanted vaccine has already gotten it. So we're now in a phase where we have vaccinators and we're working in a way that we can start moving them around and making them more mobile. So we have sufficient resources to do that because we built up a large vaccinator workforce in the beginning of the vaccination campaign. So at the present time, the health department are sufficiently staffed and we have adequate resources to do the public health work that we need to do. Similarly to what Falls Church as a jurisdiction is working through, the state is working through as well because there was ARPA funding submitted or there was ARPA funding given to Virginia, and so VDH at the state level is in receipt or will be in receipt of money through ARPA for public health initiatives and workforce development. So we're having those discussions with the state as well as one of the local health departments here in Virginia.
So please let us know if any resources are needed. Next question, where do businesses, religions, and nonprofits go to get the latest advice from you and from the CDC?
We, if individuals or businesses are looking for CDC guidance, that is available on the CDC website, and there is they have done some redesign of that website to make it easier to find guidance specific to a given industry, and it's often done by keyword search, so that is available on cdc.gov. For the latest up-to-date information from the health department, we direct people to our emergency blog, which is a county website that we use to push out information. We also have the ability for individuals to sign up for text alerts in either English or Spanish, and we use those for major announcements such as the move to substantial transmission and the recommendation for indoor masking. In addition to the blog, which is more rapid fire, we also have a litany of documents and information on our health department website. So it's fairfaxcounty.gov/health, and then there's a coronavirus tab that you can click on. And then if any of those, if individuals are not finding what they're looking for on those resources, we also have our call center, which is open Monday through Friday and can answer questions or refer them to the appropriate subject matter expert. And then we have an email address, which is ffxcovid@fairfaxcounty.gov, which routes to the health department, and then we can take the question and send it to the appropriate person for follow-up.
Okay, thanks a lot. So maybe Mr. City Manager, we could put all that together if we haven't already in a document. Let's talk about testing for a minute. I had an unexpected field trip in the testing world, and I found a couple things. First of all the drugstores, the CVS's were no available dates for days on end. The urgent care center would only do a certain type of testing for travel-related purposes. And they said they didn't have enough testing kits for the short-term, immediate kind of sort of response to the test. Where are we on testing, and what do you advise the public to do? In other words, what's the cascade of places? Let's say you want to get tested for whatever reason. You think you've been exposed, you want to get tested. What order would you send people to go to try to figure out where to get testing? And does the health department still do that?
Sure. It depends on the reason. The short answer is it depends on the reason for the test. If an individual in our health district believes that they were exposed to COVID, they are encouraged to reach out to us and let us know. We are able to work through the contact investigation process, and if they are indeed a close contact, a confirmed close contact of a case, that we are investigating. The health department will set up testing for them at a health department run testing site. That is what we call public health testing, and it has there's a specific definition for what constitutes public health testing here in Virginia. If an individual is looking for testing for travel, again, it depends on the country. If they're traveling overseas, it depends on the country they're going to. Some countries require PCR and they won't accept antigen. Others accept either one. So they'll need to look at the specific information for the embassy where they're going, and then track back to find a testing location here in Fairfax. Public health testing we cannot use public health testing resources for travel unless it's deployment, such as the Urban Search and Rescue Team or something like that. But if it's just for personal travel, then the individual would need to go through the healthcare community to get tested. There are urgent cares, as you mentioned, pharmacies. Pharmacy appointments, as you pointed out, can be a little bit more difficult to come by, partly because of an increase in cases and people feeling like they need to be tested, and also because in some places the nurses doing the testing may be working on vaccination, so that may be part of the reason for that delay. And then there are a number of resources on our dashboard, and we have a PDF that we still maintain and we keep it updated of testing locations in the Fairfax Health District. And so our call center works through that list. Every few weeks, they make outbound calls to every facility and they confirm the price and the type of testing that they're doing. And if the organization, the office that we call says that they're no longer doing testing, we take them off our list. So we refer people who are interested in getting tested but don't have a public health reason for testing to go to our dashboard, and then they can look at the PDF and find the location that has the type of test that they are looking for. The final piece I would add is that testing in the United States is free. It has remained free since the beginning of the pandemic. So insurance companies they don't pass on the cost to those who are insured. And so there are at-home options that are available. LabCorp has one of them where you can order. This is, again, for more of not the kind of testing where you need to do it quickly, but the kind of testing where you may be going out of town, or you may be coming back from somewhere else and you want to have a test available to you. You can do a test by mail. Those are pretty heavily controlled, so there's only a few companies that do them, but you can find that information online as well.
Okay, so what you're suggesting is, if you want to get tested, start with your website. That'll give you the options that are available to you, and then you need to follow up from there. Okay.
Correct.
Advice. Finally, booster shots. When and how do we think at this point that issue may be settled and discussed publicly?
I can say that the FDA process and the CDC review process for clinical guidance is very transparent. So ACIP, which is the Advisory Commission on Immunization Practices, meets regularly. They have that body has met for decades. There has been very little interest in it, but over the last 8 months, they are meeting. Attendance virtually has ballooned. And so you can access the ACIP meetings on the CDC website. You can watch them in real time. That is where discussions around booster doses will likely and ultimately occur. So we are watching ACIP whenever they meet, and we're looking for guidance to come out after the fact. It's important to note that that you may hear about pharmaceutical companies pointing to efficacy data and stating a belief or a hypothesis that it would be beneficial to receive a booster dose of their vaccine, and it's just important to note that that is not necessarily without an opposing viewpoint, and so that's where ACIP comes in, and that's where FDA and CDC come in. That at the appropriate point in time, there will be booster recommendations as needed. There has been some discussion in the open media that there may be a need for booster doses supplemental vaccine for those who are immunocompromised. That would be people who are receiving chemotherapy. They may be on immunosuppressing medications. And so that clinical guidance you may see before you see a broad kind of anyone who got vaccinated in January of 2020 needs to come back, or 2021 needs to come back. That would be coming through ACIP and through FDA, but we do not have a timeline on that.
Thank you very much, Colin.
Sure. All right, let's keep moving. We do have a busy agenda, so let's try to, if we can, keep our questions tight and move on to the bulk of our conversation here. So, Vice Mayor Connolly?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor Tarter, and thank you for being here, Colin. We've learned a lot from you in the last 18 months, so thank you for all that. I really appreciated that as you were talking about breakthrough cases, you were referring to the whole region. I think that's one of the things that in Falls Church we really are challenged by, is that we're so small, but we're not an island. And that's a really important piece of information that we need to keep sharing, is that the regional rates really matter. And there have been far more cases than the 436 in the city of Falls Church because of people who work here or travel through here, but the only number we have is 436. So I think that's important for breakthrough in all cases. Did you mention the vaccination rate for children ages 12 to 18 in Falls Church? Did I miss that?
Let me see. Let me pull up and see. I have 12 to 17 for the health district,
Okay.
which is 75.64%. Have received at least one dose.
Okay, but you don't have specific Falls Church numbers?
I don't, but I can. I will take it as an item and I will pull the numbers.
That's great, especially as we go back to school. It would be good to know what we're dealing with there. Do you have any sense of when the vaccine might be approved for under age 12? And then my other question is, do you have any sense of when the emergency use authorization may end and it would just become a regularly authorized vaccine?
Mm-hmm. I'll take this, if you don't mind. I'll do the second one first. So
sure.
The what we're waiting on is a transition from EUA to full approval for Pfizer, Moderna, and Johnson & Johnson. The Pfizer data has been submitted to the FDA for review for full approval. That will, absent some crazy turn of events, Pfizer is expected to be given full approval by the end of this month or early next month. Labor Day has been the date that was discussed publicly by Dr. Fauci. We don't have any reason to believe that that is not the case, and we are prepared for an uptick in individuals seeking vaccination once they have an FDA approved, fully approved vaccine. What I would say, just as someone who lives in this world, and many of the public health preparedness issues we've worked on over the past 2 decades are around EUA and using EUAs in a way to protect the public. And the EUA process doesn't short circuit the need to do full trials. What the EUA does is it basically allows a drug to be brought to the market when the trial size is the same as it would be for full approval, but the results are so overwhelmingly powerful that it benefits society to bring this drug onto the market earlier than waiting for all of the hoops that you need to jump through for full approval. And so it really, we don't want members of our community to think that in some way this was rushed or short-circuited. The EUA process is largely around paperwork and regulatory permissions within FDA, but the vaccines that are out there are safe and effective, EUA or not. And then your question about when we would get to those ages 2 and up, that would be, we're also waiting on formal word on that, but those would be, Moderna is running a trial, Pfizer's running a trial. Last week or the week before, both were asked to expand their trial sizes to account or to allow for additional data on any myocarditis risk, which is something we saw with the mRNA vaccines in the 12 to 17 group. So that set it back a little bit. We were looking at a timeline around now or a little bit later, prior to the trials being expanded. But again, the trials being expanded and the date being pushed back kind of points to this EUA process working in the best interest of public safety.
All right.
Thank you.
Mr. Duncan, your last word on this.
Well, admonished thusly, I'll try to be as brief as I can. Thank you, Colin. Y'all have the hardest job. I appreciate your instinct to play up the myth-busting data of all the things you've said tonight. To me, the thing that I would put at the top above the fold is the incredible percentage of people who have not been vaccinated who are showing up in hospital emergency rooms. I mean, just about everybody who's showing up really sick has not been vaccinated. And the overwhelming number of people who have been vaccinated are at worst getting, fairly mild versions of this more virulent strain. So I would say to your communications people and to ours too, that data, I don't know, just try to put it out there as often and as loudly and as scarily as you can. Because the number of people who've been vaccinated, even if you're, on the most optimistic side, as I hear you talk about it tonight, is like 75%. And some of that is people who can't be vaccinated, younger folks for whom there's not a vaccine yet. And some of it, unfortunately, is people who just haven't gotten around to it, or maybe a very few that have medical reasons. That's understandable. But, the situation that we face here in Falls Church is in the very near future, we're going to have 3 potentially super spreader type events. 1 is the Tenor Hill Festival, 2 is the Fall Festival, and 3 is the Falls Church Education Foundation. And you've got, the people here right in front of you tonight who have to run those events. And what you said about the virility of the Delta suggests to me that, we really need to communicate to folks that even at outdoor events, if you're not vaccinated, and probably even if you are, you need to go masked and you need to keep your distance. I won't go as far as to say that, we just assume you didn't show up if you're not vaccinated to any of those 3 events, but I'm getting close to that. And simply because, what I hear folks say is that the kids have got to get back to school. We have got to get the kids back in school. And if we are having these large scale outdoor events, in late August, early mid-September, I'm just fearful that sometime towards the end of September, even if the kids have started back in school, it's going to be hard to keep them there. And we just do not want to go there at all. So sometime in the next 5 weeks, while Counsel is in recess, I think we're going to hit a break point on our messaging on this, on vaccine verification, on, whether we're going to continue with virtual meetings or go live with in-person meetings. And so much of that has to do, obviously, with how many people get vaccinated. So let's try to, keep pounding that data point out. One quick question to close out. The number that the health district presents has sometimes on some of the charts got an asterisk on it that says federal cases are not counted. I asked the staff about this last week, and do you have any estimate of the number of federal folks in the health district, or ideally in the city of Falls Church, whose vaccines are not showing up in your numbers just because they're somewhere in some federal trove of information that we don't have access to?
Yeah, that hits us particularly hard given the number of federal employees we have in our health district. The short answer is we have asked for that data. Virginia as a whole has asked the federal government for that data. The best that we've received is a number aggregated for the state. So with the VDH data team was able to obtain a number for the total number of federal employees who are vaccinated, individuals who are vaccinated through the federal healthcare system. So it could be retirees who were vaccinated at the VA or another DoD facility. So we do not have that data at the local level, and to my knowledge, we're not we're not expected to receive that data anytime soon. It's just being reported as to the 50 states as here's the total number for your state.
Okay, well, that's good. I'll stop asking that question. I've asked it at every council meeting for at least 2 months, and it just sounds like we're not going to get the answer to that. And so to me, that underscores even more, play up the data that we know to be the case, which is the hospitalization data, and let's just pound away on that, because I think, just the soft and gentle approach it's just not getting it done. We just have got to get people awakened to the danger that's posed by what we're heading into. And it could be as bad as what we had last winter or worse if we do not, do what we know can be done to help ward this thing off. Well, thank you. Sorry, Mr. Mayor.
It's okay. It's okay. We just got a lot on the agenda. I want to make sure we keep going. But anyway, thank you, Mr. Brody, for the update and all the great work you all do over there to keep us all healthy and safe. So thank you, and look forward to speaking with you further. Let's move on to the next item on the agenda, which actually is the business on the agenda. Madam Clerk?
Yes, I will call the first two items together. Is that correct?
Well, if you can call all of them, go ahead and call them all, but I would defer to the city attorney.
I will too.
Yeah, I would recommend we sort of cover all of the West Falls items together so that we can cover the material and answer questions and discuss them together, and then they would all have separate motions.
Okay, I
City
can read
Attorney,
them.
do you agree?
Oh, sorry.
That's fine with me.
All right, and most of them are public hearings, so I will start from the beginning. We have TR 20-29, resolution to grant special exception entitlement amendment for a mixed-use development project with a building height up to 15 stories on approximately 9.78 acres of land located at 7124 Leesburg Pike, portions of real property code numbers 51-221-007 and 008 on application by Falls Church Gateway Partners. We have TR 20-30, resolution to grant special exception site plan section 48-488.B3 for a mixed-use development project with a building height up to 15 stories on approximately 8.83 acres of land located at 7124 Leesburg Pike, portions of real property code numbers 51-221-007 and 008 on application by Falls Church Gateway Partners. We have TR 21-07, resolution approving the acquisition of approximately 0.33 acres of land from the Falls Church City School Board to the City of Falls Church, being a portion of real property code number 51-221-008, located at 7124 Leesburg Pike, and authorizing the city manager to accept a deed of conveyance and execute the deed of re-subdivision and such other documents as may be necessary to complete the transaction. We have TO 21-10, ordinance to create and establish the West Falls Community Development Authority. We have TR 21-23, resolution to approve the Second Amendment to the Comprehensive Agreement authorized in Resolution 2019-15 as amended in Resolution 2021-01 with FCGP Development LLC for the West Falls Church Economic Development Project and authorize the city manager to execute the amendment. And there also is an additional item to do with the CDA, which is TR 21-26, resolution to approve bylaws for the West Falls Community Development Authority, CDA, and to direct the CDA to adopt those bylaws at its first meeting.
All right, thank you very much. Mr. Shields?
All right, well, thank you to the city clerk. That's a lot to go over. So with these items that are before the council, let me just start by noting the people who are on the call to respond to council questions. I will say that all of our staff reports tonight will be rather brief, as well as the developers report. We'll just discuss any changes that have occurred in the last week since work session. And we anticipate that there will be council questions, so we want to allow time for that and any council comments prior to final consideration, which is on the agenda for tonight for each of these items. For the two land use entitlement items, Carly Aubrey is our staff lead on those, and she will provide a short update to the council on those items. For the CDA, we are joined by our outside legal counsel, Peter Canzano and Jim McGetrick, and they, along with the city attorney, will provide you information on those items and answer any questions that you have on those. We also have the development team of Falls Church Gateway Partners on the call, and we have representatives of Trammell Crow, who will be the senior developer as well as the office developer, also on the call to respond to any questions that you might have tonight. The staff recommendation for each of these items is a favorable recommendation in favor of adoption tonight. I will note before I turn it over to Carly for a staff report that at the work session there were questions about the financials of the overall project, and we have included those in the staff report. And if council would like, I have just a few slides to summarize those, but I won't launch into those unless the council requests those, and then I can put those up and just provide a summary on the financials. Ms. Aubrey, if you could provide a staff report first on the land use items.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Shields. Good evening, council. I'm going to briefly go through the updates since last week, specifically on the affordable dwelling units, the other voluntary concessions, and the SEE amendment and SESP applications. All updates to the staff reports since the August 2nd council work session are highlighted in gray in the staff report, and a table is provided on pages 4 through 6 with a summary of the council comments and questions from last week's work session along with staff responses. So starting with the ADUs and the senior housing component, staff recommends that the city accept the cash in lieu for the 8 units, and this would be an annual payment of $228,401 with a 3% yearly escalation for the life of the project, and that equates to $134 million over the 99-year term of the 99-year term of the lease. It would be used to provide housing for low to moderate income seniors by subsidizing the rent and fees at any senior project in the city. For the West Falls development, this amount would cover 2 to 3 households in the independent or the assisted living sections, or 2 households in the memory care section, or a combination of that. And accepting the 8 ADUs in the independent living section only would provide limited benefit because the ADU rent does not include the cost of those services, and those costs would be unaffordable to households with incomes at 60% AMI or lower. And for the ADUs for the other components, based on initial council feedback on the 2 ADU program options that are provided in the staff report, FCGP has drafted the SESP VCs to meet the original requirement of the city, which was to provide 6% of total apartments affordable at 60% AMI. And the details of this, as well as the alternative ADU program, can be found on page 8 of the staff report. Staff does recommend that council determine its desired ADU mix as part of the final consideration of these applications. For the remaining voluntary concessions, updated VCs have been provided, and in addition to those just discussed, FCGP has included a $200,000 contribution to Falls Church City Public Schools. The staff report also provides, starting on page 11, a summary of the VCs previously under discussion, a summary of the use program commitment, and a list of the major project community benefits and contributions that are included as part of the VCs. The staff analysis, including key staff comments, begins on page 16 of the staff report, and 2 remaining key staff comments were identified last week. The first one was that the voluntary concessions are to be in final form, and as I mentioned, FCGP has provided the final VCs this afternoon. The second key comment was for the request for additional commercial uses not explicitly listed in the approved SEE are permitted by right in B2 zoning district. Staff had requested that FCGP provide additional information and restrictions on these uses, which, if approved by council, would be added to the project and listed in the SESP resolution. So after discussion last week between staff and FCGP, these proposed uses and restrictions include, I'll just go over briefly, the daycare, a location limitation that it not front onto the commons, that the amount is limited to 12,240 square feet. If an increase is sought, it would have to be approved by council and could not decrease the overall retail square footage of the site. The second use would be bowling or similar activities with the maximum square footage of 40,000 square feet and would need to include food and beverage services. The third use is pet services, such as veterinarian with temporary boarding for medical purposes, and that would be restricted to secondary retail areas and a max square footage of 15,000 square feet. Fourth use would be a radio station with a maximum square footage of 4,000 square feet. And the fifth use would be mobile food services, such as ghost kitchens, limited to secondary retail areas with a limit of 7,500 square feet, and food trucks subject to regulation under existing ordinances and permitting processes. So in conclusion, the staff recommends that the council adopt resolutions TR 20-29 and TR 20-30. This is based on the staff analysis in the report that demonstrates the project achieves the goals of the Special Revitalization District for Education and Economic Development and is consistent with the comprehensive plan. The project also complies with zoning code requirements for special exception entitlements and special exception site plans. The two applications have been reviewed by boards and commissions, and the Planning Commission has provided recommendations of approval of these applications, including the request for additional senior housing square footage at their public meeting last week on August 4th. And their specific motions are provided under the board and commission's review section. So that concludes my staff report, and I can take any questions.
All right, thank you very much. And if there's nothing immediate or urgent now, we can go ahead and ask questions at the end of all the presentations. Are there additional staff presentations, Mr. Shields, or is he going over the developer now?
So we will have information to convey on the CDA, just a quick summary. But before we get to that, I would propose we give the development team an opportunity to speak and just indicate some of the ways that they have any actions they've taken over the past week to respond to council comments.
All right, thank you. To our developer, welcome, and please proceed.
Hi all, good evening council. Thank you for having us once again. We'll try to be very brief here, knowing that we have a big agenda to cover. We've had a lot of good discussions with the city staff over the last week, most importantly finalizing the terms of the affordable housing and finalizing a donation to Falls Church City Public Schools, which have appeared in the most recent VCs that we've sent over. We've also clarified a lot of language and sort of, I would potentially say more minor items in the VCs, accepting a lot of staff's last minute suggestions and comments there, even as late as this afternoon. So thank you very much to staff for all of your hard work and guidance over these last couple weeks to get us to this point. We're very excited to be here, and what we hope will be our final appearance on this particular entitlement, but certainly not the end of a conversation that we will be having with the city over the course of the next 2 years as we hopefully move towards some of the more fun parts of the project. We still have to name the streets. We still have some additional design work to do. We have a lot of placemaking to do, and we really look forward to the city's partnership in those items. Our slides are a little bit of a repeat of what you've already seen, just reminding everyone of sort of the big picture of this project and everything that it promises, and how thrilled we are to be at this point. So whoever is controlling the slides, I'm not sure, but you can sort of flip through. Again, this project offers close to 140,000 square feet of ground floor retail, surrounding a almost 1 acre park space with multimodal transportation on either side of it. It's adding a grid of streets with walkable, bikeable routes, both to the new school that we know the city is so proud of, and also to the future development at the Metro, which won't be far behind this project at the end of the day. And just a quick update on that, we have officially signed our joint development agreement with Walmatta on that site. And so we're very happy to also be moving forward there. And I think it'll be a great benefit to this project to have all of this development come online more or less around the same time. I think the impact will be greater, and the city portion of the greater 32 acres that includes the Virginia Tech campus and the Walmatta campus certainly is planned to be the hub of activity for the entire area. And I think that's going to be a great thing for Falls Church and the city. Next slide, please. This is another newer rendering that we showed at the work session last week, showing down at the commons level all of the vibrancy that the site will bring to the area. This is particularly shown as a night where you might close some of the commons down and have a lot of food trucks and more of a festival atmosphere. Next slide. And this is a new view also looking down from Route 7, kind of showcasing the project entrance. There's some opportunity there for placemaking that is in that sort of triangle right as you enter the site, but you can see the large public open space, and here this is actually showing it continuing through the Virginia Tech site, which is still something yet to be designed. We have had a lot of great conversations with the folks over there moving that forward with the help from the grant that the city worked on to get from VDOT. Next slide, please. This is a view of one of the cornerstones of the retail program at the project, right at the corner of Haycock and Route 7. It's a great sort of corner now, announcing the project, announcing that you've entered the City of Falls Church. This is where the grocer main entrance will be, and this is the main multifamily apartment. Had a lot of feedback over the last couple years from various boards and commissions, city residents, council staff. We're very proud of how this building has turned out, and are happy that we have the grocer lease in hand, and it's going to be a fantastic experience that I think everyone's going to be really excited for once that can be announced and discussed more openly. Next slide, please. Another view of the project as you enter off of Haycock through the sort of pedestrian via, as we've discussed. I think this is another great placemaking point and node, and could also be a hub of activity. I think it's a much better pedestrian experience than what currently exists there today for folks coming over from the Federal Realty site across the street on Haycock, and we're very excited for how this is going to eventually interface with the redevelopment there. Next slide, please. These are some slides to remind everyone of the great design that Trammell Crow, our partner on the senior housing, has put forward for the senior living building. You can sort of flip through these relatively quickly. I don't want to dwell on them too much, but just sort of a reminder of what a nice building and handsome building this is going to turn out to be. And we're very pleased to have such a high quality partner in the mix with us here for this project. We can end here just to remind everyone of kind of where we've come from. We've come quite far in a very short amount of time, thanks to the hard work and dedication of all of the folks here on the council and a lot of the other folks on the phone on the city staff. It has truly been a partnership. I know we've had our disagreements at times, and may even hopefully walk down the aisle with a few things unresolved. As you do in any marriage, you take a leap of faith that you've chosen the right person, and you're going to build something beautiful together. And I really do feel that way in this case. We are very close to our break ground early in Q1 of next year, and it's go time. We are out there to the capital markets right now, and this entitlement is a very important sort of crowning point on those books that we have out to the market. We have a lot of work left to do. Our team is fully ramped up. We have a lot of folks working on this project at this point, many of whom have now become quite familiar to city staff. And we are very excited and look forward to any further comments and questions that council may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We appreciate that. Back to you, Mr. Shields, or to our outside attorneys?
Carol, let me turn it over to you just for an update on the CDA if council is ready for that, and we'll work through those items and then just get questions in general.
Right, and I think that we just have Jim McGetrick on the phone today, and he can cover any questions we have or you all have, but I will just go through. I'm not going to run through the basics again on the CDA. I think you all have heard those enough times. Let me mention, there's not any city backup to the CDA obligations. I will note the structure of the motions, and what we've done with that is, first, we're going to ask that council move to adopt the proposed ordinance, and that this is simply because of the way the statutes govern the creation of a CDA. And normally, once you adopt a proposed ordinance, the petitioners have the ability to withdraw their petition. I think the ordinance, what the statutes presume is that the city might come up with an ordinance that the petitioners don't like. And if they get it at the last minute, then they should have the right to withdraw, since they will bear the burden of the taxes or the assessments that are the result of the ordinance. And therefore, this system is set up where there would be a 30-day waiting period after the adoption of the proposed ordinance, unless a petitioner waives their right to withdraw the petition. And in this case, we have, and it's part of the materials that were posted, we have waivers from each petitioner of the 30-day period. So to follow the statutes, first we would move to adopt the proposed ordinance, then we will verify that we have waivers from each of the petitioners, and then council would adopt a second motion to finally adopt TO 2110. So it's two motions, it's one ordinance, and it's simply to make sure we affirm that the 30-day waiting period has been waived. But we received all of those waivers last week, and that is in place and ready to go. So I think that's really the main item. The other thing that I will mention also is that we have an added resolution where council will approve bylaws for the West Falls Community Development Authority and direct the CDA to adopt those bylaws at its first meeting. Those draft bylaws have been prepared by outside counsel and were posted today. They're fairly basic bylaws, and so that resolution has been added, and we would ask that you pass that tonight so that the framework will be in place when the CDA first meets, which will be during your break. I'm just going to look at my notes and make sure. I think, the other thing that I did want to mention on the CDA is that your action in approving the ordinance also approves the articles of incorporation that have been attached. And those articles of incorporation include the members, the initial members of the board of directors of the CDA. Based on council's input, the members that are currently being appointed are Wyatt Shields, Kieran Bawa, Debbie Shantz-Hiscott, David Snyder, and Bob Young. Bob Young was a request of the EDA to appoint him. In the event that we have a citizen appointment in the near future, I believe one of the staff people would resign from the CDA board. But in order to stand it up now, we have those 5 appointments, and they will happen as a result of your adoption of the ordinance, because they are part of the articles of incorporation. And we will also be taking council's approval as direction to file those articles of incorporation with the State Corporation Commission, and we will take care of that before the CDA board can meet. So with that, if there are any questions, Jim McGettrick is here, or I can try to answer things. And those are 2 items we will have: the CDA creation, the final adoption of that ordinance, and the bylaws.
All right, thank you very much. Let's move on now, unless there's any additional staff presentations, to questions from council or comments. Anyone have any questions? Mr. Snyder?
Sure, thanks. Could I ask the city manager to put up his slides on the finances of the overall project? I think they're very helpful for the public to understand them.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Snyder. And Cindy has just put the slides up. What the summary would cover briefly, and just try to knit things together, and is the lease payments, the fiscal impact analysis, which is all about projections, but they are projections based on a lot of actual data from the city, so they're a very disciplined set of projections, and then a summary of the public improvements that are part of this project as well. Next slide. So the capital lease payments, which are laid out in the comprehensive agreement, for phase 1, those payments total $25.5 million, and then phase 2, the payment is $10 million, or appraised value, whichever is higher. So the capital lease payments total $35.5 million. There's, in addition to that, a 99-year lease structure that starts in 2025 at $200,000 per year, which escalates at a rate of 2.75% over the 99-year term of the lease. There is a $25,000 increase that gets added to that in FY 2031. Next slide. So this chart summarizes the capital lease payments and the 99-year payments together, so you can see them side by side. The capital lease payments are broken into the tranches that are shown here. The first being $6.5 million, which has already been paid by the development team, and then the this fiscal year, and the following 3 years will have a payment of $4.5 million, and then in 2026 a $1 million payment, and then in 2029 is the outside closing date for phase 2 with a $10 million payment. The and outside closing date is, I'm using that phrase a little bit loosely, but that is, there's sort of a series of options that begin in 2026 where the developer either closes on phase 2 or makes a significant payment that's non-refundable beginning in 2026. The ground lease payments, as I noted just a moment ago, they start at $200,000. They escalate at 2.75% up through 21, 99 years from the beginning of the closing date of the ground lease. That has a nominal value of $91 million, a present value of $12.7 million with a 3% discount rate. Next slide. In addition to the lease payments, there are profit share provisions, and that includes the land lift profit share, which would be split 50-50 between the city and the developer at project financing, and the residential condominium profit share, where a portion of the condo profits would be shared with the city if sales exceed $750 per foot. In addition, there's a capital administrative fee of 25 basis points on the condo sales after the first round of sales. So this is all just kind of reviewing what was discussed with the earlier comprehensive agreement. Next slide. The fiscal impact analysis, that is in the staff report. And just to note a few highlights from it. The net fiscal impact projection, which is prepared by city staff using the city's fiscal impact model, which is based on our own budget and our own trends in terms of what projects are yielding in the city. So at stabilization in 2029, after the pilot program is ended, the net fiscal impact is projected to be just over $5 million per year. So the components of that is a $7.9 million revenue projection from phase one of the project, minus the city expenses, which is based on the formulas that are built into our projection model of $2.9 million for a net, again, of just over $5 million per year of net fiscal impact. One of the key things is what are we projecting the assessed value of the overall project to be, and we are currently projecting that to be $380 million. Using our data from what projects across the city yield in terms of students, we are projecting 65 students would come from the residential portions of this project. Next slide. So one of the key reasons that we embarked on this many years ago now was to generate revenue sufficient to cover the debt service for the high school. And so this chart really was something we discussed quite a bit in the December and January timeframe to make sure that with changes to the economics of the deal that we were still covering our debt service. And we are. We do have those years of 26 and 27, 26, 27, and 28, where we'll be drawing down on reserves as we work through the construction period where we get to stabilization. We had modeled back in January a $4 million net fiscal impact, and we're currently projecting $5 million. Usually with our finance department, we tend on the conservative side on these types of projections, and that's just one example of it. So this chart just lays out what the debt service exposure is and how the revenues from this project are covering that debt service for the high school. Next slide. We do have public investment in this site as well, and that includes a Northern Virginia Transportation Authority grant of $15 million, which is being used for off-site transportation improvements on Haycock Road and on Route 7. That's paying for the signals and for the intersection improvements that will allow people to get in and out safely and effectively for this project. The Community Development Authority that we're talking about tonight is in the comprehensive agreement was slated as up to $15 million. I think as we've refined those numbers, it's going to be lower than that. But what those dollars would be used for is on-site public infrastructure that will ultimately be owned by the city, such things as roads and stormwater interior to the site. And the bonds by that Community Development Authority will be paid exclusively by a special assessment on the property itself. We have the Smart Cities grant that was referenced earlier in this meeting, and that is a $10 million grant that was approved by the General Assembly last summer. That is for the entire 44-acre site, including Walmatta, the city, and Virginia Tech properties. And that grant is being administered by VDOT on behalf of Virginia Tech and the city, and will be used for technologies to improve transportation flow throughout the site, access to parking, transit, and other forward-looking technologies that we believe will be very helpful to the overall functioning of the site. And then lastly, just the Washington Gas relocation. That is a $2 million infrastructure piece that the city is financing to move the gas pressure regulator station from the school site where it's been for many years. It's being relocated now as we speak. It's under construction to the West End Park, and that's being financed by the city. So that's just a summary of some of the key items that relate to the overall financing of the high school and how this project is covering that debt service and with adequate margins of safety for the city's financial well-being. So that is a core motivation of this project, as well as creating a great place and a vibrant environment with outstanding retail and amenities that the whole city and region can enjoy. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Sure. Thank you very much. Mr. Mayor, let me just ask a couple quick follow-up questions. I'll make comments later.
Sure.
The net fiscal numbers, does that include any school and other public service related costs? In other words, the VCs and other projects have included a school capital cost. Is there a separate VC on that, or you're sort of including all of that under your net number?
So the expenses are included, and so those are costs for police service for the site, responding to 911 calls, educating the students that will come out of this site, providing all of city services for the residents and businesses that eventually will be part of this community. And that's what the model intends to capture. It does not capture extraordinary capital costs, and so that is not in part of the model. We, in other projects, have negotiated voluntary concessions to help the city cover capital costs. Because this project was so intrinsically related to covering the capital costs for the high school, we wanted to keep the, going back to the original RFP, we wanted to keep the real estate transaction relatively clean so that those dollars would be made available immediately to cover that debt service as opposed to being tied up in VCs. It all gets to purchase price, and so that's being covered in the lease payments.
Okay, thanks very much. Let me ask the developers, is there anything in this presentation that you disagree with? Or asked differently, do you agree with the numbers that are being provided here?
Yeah, this is the deal that we came to earlier this year.
Okay, thank you. Another question, how are we tying residential development to commercial development? In other words, how are we assuring that we'll get the commercial development that we think we're going to get and that we'd like to have?
The two are tied together, and in the voluntary concessions, the issuance of any residential certificate of occupancy is tied to or is conditioned upon the permits having been filed with the city for the office and the hotel.
Okay. Just a couple quick questions on the CDA. City Attorney, the CDA, once it's created, is it an instrumentality of the city or is it independent? And if so, is there provision being made for outside counsel, outside accounting, and outside risk management and insurance coverage for the board's activities and otherwise the activities of the CDA? Because it will be at some point involved with millions of dollars. Thank you.
Jim, do you want to go ahead and give that general answer? or I mean, I can give, let me give you my best answer and then Jim can fill in if necessary. How about that? I think that the CDA is created by the city, but then becomes an independent political subdivision. I do think that as far as its risk management, it's an authority, which is an independent political subdivision, just like the EDA, which has its general insurance through the city's insurance from Versa, and the CDA would be treated in the same way. If there were a substantial issue, which we don't anticipate given that there will be one issuance of bonds, then we might end up hiring outside counsel to advise them. But with regard to the issuance of bonds, bond counsel can generally work with the issuer's counsel, and I can handle any minor matters that they have until such time as something bigger comes up. And then there might be something that we would have to get outside counsel for, but that's not anticipated at this point. With regard to the accounting, my understanding is that they will treat this, the accountants will treat this, them as a, I'm sorry, I don't have the words in front of me, the blended, they'll be related to the city and be a blended income, so that the accountants will require that our financial statements are done and include some of the input from the CDA, so it's not possible to do it completely separately. With regard to the cost of the expenses of the CDA moving forward, generally there will be administrative services provided by an outside contractor who will manage all the money, and that the cost of that administrator will be paid out of bond proceeds.
Okay, and two quick follow-up questions. Is the thinking from outside counsel and you that we should do a bond validation suit if the decision is made to issue bonds? I assume the answer would be yes, although that might be up for further discussion. And the second point is, assuming that there's let's hope that this doesn't happen, but for hypothetical purposes, as a default, the bondholders aren't paid. What happens to the CDA and the CDA board members at that point, and are they going to be covered adequately for risk management and insurance purposes?
I believe the CDA board members would be adequately protected through the city's insurance and also through through the statutes governing CDAs and related authorities. They would have the same type of protection that the city council members have with regard to issuance of, city bonds. It is my belief that we would not be undertaking, or we don't anticipate undertaking a bond validation procedure or suit at this point. I think that these are fairly common purposes for which these bonds are issued, and the authority is clear. But I would ask Jim to weigh in, especially on that latter point, because it's not.
I would agree. This is not a unique or novel approach to a financing. This has been done in Virginia, and I don't believe that there's a need for a validation. In other words, the validation is to make the bonds marketable. I mean, fundamentally, that's what a validation is for. Exactly. But I think the market is not going to expect a validation for something like these.
I think another thing that I will mention again is that prior to the issuance of any bonds, we will come to council for your all's approval of that issuance. So there will be an opportunity to look at it and see what has been developed in terms of all the specifics. But I think these would also, as I recall, and Jim, correct me if I'm wrong, but we're expecting that these bonds would be sold to institutional investors, not to individuals. So
Absolutely.
Yeah. So
you're not going to be able to buy them in front of a Safeway like Girl Scout cookies.
Oh, okay, I'll leave it there. Thanks very much. I'll make a few comments later on. And thanks to the mayor and other members of council for giving me an opportunity to ask these questions.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Duncan.
Thank you. 3 quick questions, which hopefully won't take long. One, Robin, the number of condominiums in the project, maybe it's because of the demographic that I run with, but there's a lot of interest in the city among a certain slice of our population who are empty nesters or near so to sell their homes but stay in the city, and they would like a condominium product to move into. Could you remind me again, or just tell the public for my benefit, what the numbers of condominiums are in this community that we're creating here with this vote tonight, and when they would phase in?
Sure. We have currently designed 126 condominium units, and we are so far trending somewhat larger in terms of having more 2 bedrooms and dens and 3 bedrooms than we might typically do in a DC condo, anticipating that sort of demand that you're talking about. Mm-hmm. And they would start to deliver with the full project in Q3 of 2024.
And what's the height of the buildings in which they and the apartments are going to be in?
So the condo is on Block C, which is the block in the sort of, I guess you would call that the northwest corner of the site, roughly, adjacent to the school, Grove, and across the street from the Virginia Tech property. And it is currently designed to be 11 stories, concrete structure. Mm-hmm. So,
okay, good.
Not quite a high rise like in Tyson's, but a high rise compared to most DC products.
Yeah, that's good. Okay, fine. And I assume that those plans are pretty well in place. I mean, we believe financial markets will loan you money to provide that product. And, well, let me just say, let's very much try to stick with that, because I think that's an important element in this project that is, as I say, appealing to a certain segment of the community. So I'm all for that. Second question, I've brought this up before, but I wonder now that I look at the numbers, there's about 3,000 square feet in the civic space called Event Space Conference Center. Does somebody who's in the conference center business able to tell me how many people I can fit into a 3,000 square foot room? Is that along the nature of a few dozens, or is it in the low hundreds, or what are we talking about in that space?
Sure. I'm probably going to botch the exact count, but there's various code requirements for different types of events. So my recollection is that for a sort of seated dinner type of event, it would allow for roughly 175 to 200 people. I can't be exactly quoted on that, but we could get back to you with those exact numbers for various types of events. Standing room events are different than seated dinner events, are different than events with a dance floor, etc. There's different occupancy allowances based on the number of restrooms that you have, overall size of the space, exits, etc.
Great. Yeah. If you could, put your folks to work generating. You see that kind of information in any hotel brochure or whatever. I think that would be useful again to sort of get people excited about the prospect of us having a facility in the city that will host fairly good sized events that we now have to go to Tyson's or Merrifield or elsewhere to do. It's a sign of us becoming a true independent self-service city. Third, you said groundbreaking in Q1, so that means before 1st of April of next year. Is that what you're aiming for?
That is our target, yes.
All right. Well, those are 3 questions I had. The only 2 other observations are, number 1, the blackest day in town is going to be, assuming we get past the pandemic, is going to be the day that all those trees are cut down at the corner of Haycock and Route 7. I mean, there's just no getting around it. They've got to go if the project is going to do what we want it to do. But I'm just laying that out there right here and right now so that we can message, all the many fine environmental qualities, the things that we're doing in so many areas to make this a progressive kind of place to live, and the buildings themselves and how people get around. But let's get our message people geared for the reality that when those trees go down at the corner of the road, that's going to need to be put in some sort of context, I think. And second, just because so much of this information has been being perfected here at the last minute, I would just ask you all and the staff to make sure that the public is fully and widely explained to about some of the things that we're going to vote on tonight. I mean, I've tried to plow through as much of the documents as I can, but I can't admit that I've read all 141 pages of one thing or 120 of the other. If there's anything in there that's buried that needs to be perfected or corrected or whatever, I would hope that we would all work cooperatively to do that, and also to let the public know exactly what it is that we're doing tonight. All right, well, that's all I have for right now. Thanks.
All right, next up, I think, is Ms. Hiscott and then Ms. Hardy.
Thank you. I had another along the lines of Councilman Duncan and things that we're looking forward to in the development. One of those areas is the civic space we've talked about, and I just wanted to get an update on what the plan is and what is to be expected in that civic area, arts area.
Why, is that one that you want me to field, or?
Yeah, I think it would be helpful just if you could share where we are on that project, or that aspect of the project.
Sure, and unfortunately it would be probably helpful in explaining it to have the floor plan for the Block C ground level. But essentially what's planned there is a roughly 3,000 square foot event space that would also sort of do double duty as concert space and or studio space for an arts user who we are still speaking with and hoping to get something done with. So thank you, Cindy, or whomever put that up. But if you look at Block C, that entire square there, the condo building is the sort of L-shaped yellow building, but underneath that green square of courtyard, which actually appears on the second level of the condo, beneath that is the civic space, the planned civic space. And so all of this sort of ground floor retail in Block C that doesn't front onto the commons has been reserved for a civic user. And included in that space is a 3,000 square foot event space, again, that we hope could sort of do double time when it's not being used for evening or daytime events, would be performance and studio space for an arts education user who we've been speaking with and are very close to coming to final terms with, we hope. We have one final issue that we're sort of trying to work out with them. But I am hopeful that we are going to get a deal done relatively soon here, now that we can turn focus to that. But in terms of the event space, we've had a lot of discussions with city staff. We have several event sort of, I would call them flex event spaces at the Wharf that can be used for many different types of events and activities, and we've sort of shared some of the marketing materials that we have for those spaces at the Wharf with city staff to sort of show them an example of how it might work operationally. The property manager for the overall site, who's sort of managing the retail environment once the project's in its operational stage, would likely be the group that would manage the reservations for that event space. So it would manage the bookings, would manage the marketing of the space, etc. It would come with, adjacent restrooms, a lobby and pre-function space, and a catering kitchen, all of which would be able to be used by the civic user as well, so that civic tenant. So that's sort of the vision. It's a, 16-foot clear, roughly, space. So it's a really nice space along Street A, which is sort of this nice tree-lined, smaller, minor street off of the Commons. I don't know if that answered your questions, Ms. Councilmember Hiscott, but happy to follow up with further information.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing more about that. I'm glad that since some of the other issues are hopefully moving forward, we can circle back to that and wrap that up. That's great. Thank you.
Ms. Hardy?
Thank you. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Before I forget, Ms. Aubrey, thank you for highlighting all the changes from the last one. I think, as Mr. Duncan said, there's so many pages in the staff reports. I appreciate getting kind of a red line version, at least in the staff report. I'm going to go backwards. So starting with the CDA, and thank you to Ms. Hiscott and Mr. Snyder and others for stepping up to serve on the CDA. I think it is still our intention to interview citizens for that fifth member. A question, I guess, for staff is, given that if we approve the CDA tonight and we seat those 5 members, would we just go back in September with some sort of amendment, or how would that work to redo that makeup of that group?
Well, I think what we would do is, I think that the staff members, originally we intended to have 1 staff member, and we have 2 appointed now. So I believe that Council has to appoint the members of the CDA. That's how the Articles of Incorporation work. And so when you were ready to appoint a citizen, we would get that on your agenda, and then likely one of the staff members would be resigning from the CDA board at that point.
Great. Okay, I'm comfortable with that. And I think the appointments committee is looking forward to interviewing our residents who've applied thus far. My next question is on the senior affordable. So the staff recommendation to take the cash in lieu. And I think I saw in the staff report that we noted this would accommodate 2 to 3 seniors in independent living, or less than that if they need more care. So let's say we found 3 seniors who are independent living and don't have a whole extra needs. If they graduate in needing more level of care, does the amount set aside take care of those needs? Given that the number wasn't really that far off, it was like 2 to 3 if it's independent, or only 2 if it's higher level of care.
I'll defer to Nancy on that one.
Hi, that my estimate is yes. So if we had somebody in the independent living and needed the higher care, based on the figures that were provided to us by Robin and her team for rent plus services, it would cover whoever the individual is as they progress from independent to assisted living. And Ms. Hardy, does that answer your question?
Yeah, I was just expecting a larger difference, right? Because if we think that the assisted living would require so much more money that it might serve, say, 4 or 5 people in independent living, and then maybe only 2, I just want to make sure that if we do end up with more than the 2 or 3, we have a means of providing them continuous care.
So the estimates that we got were that it was about $7,500 for both the independent living and the assisted living. And that the memory care was a little bit higher. That was about $9,000.
Okay. And then my last one is really just a comment on where we ended up, I think, in a good place with the 4 to 6%. So more my comment is, I think from a policy perspective, we absolutely should be housing the full spectrum of incomes as a city. We really should be walking the talk of being kind of a community for all. But I think it's clear that we probably need to spend more time on really strategy to get there. So I think inclusionary zoning, which is what we're doing right now through our voluntary concessions, is just one way. And so I look forward to staff providing additional recommendations on how we can provide for those deeper AMI levels, because clearly we can't solve affordable housing just with new development. So that's it for now. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Lichtenhouse. Ross, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I did, Dave. Thanks for that. I just wanted to make a couple comments here about this, just some kind of final closing comments now that we're on second reading for most of these. And generally speaking, I'm in support of moving these forward. I think that staff, I think that our development partners, I think those of us on council have spent an inordinate amount of time working through deal specifics. Frankly, I think, and I'd asked some of these questions in prior weeks and in prior meetings about our net fiscals and some of the impacts of some of the ancillary and indirect development that's going to be taking place around our site. And generally, I think that our net fiscals on this project are fairly conservative. And I do truly think that they're going to be far greater than what we have modeled. I think it's wise for us to model conservatively, because I think it puts us in a good position to be able to plan accordingly, a good negotiating position, but also provides, I think, a realistic kind of nod to the unexpected. And I will say that, in every deal that we do here as a city, and frankly, every commercial real estate deal, especially of this size, there are always going to be changes, deviations, I think, from the expected. And the deals are always hairy. And I think they come with a lot of bumps and bruises on both sides. But generally speaking, we take a step back and look at the genesis for moving forward with this project in all its complexities, whether it's CDA, it's the ADU component, it's the complexity of the asset types that were included, the complexities of selecting a partner from a stable of very strong candidates. And at the end of the day, I think that this project and where we stand today accomplishes everything that we set out to do. And that was build a unique project here for the city that we can all be proud of, a community benefit, a community amenity, and also pays for our school. And I think the thing that excites me the most is that, looking at the fiscals, or what I believe to be the fiscals of this project, we've got the ability to meaningfully substantially reduce our property tax rate across the city. Given the net fiscals are going to be produced. I mean, if you look at what staff's reporting, which again I think is somewhat conservative, you're looking at, once stabilized, 11 cents on the tax rate as it stands today, and that's not including the capitalized ground lease and all the other benefits that are going to be experienced and seen as part of this project. So, I'm not asking questions. I'm kind of through asking questions at this point. I know that there are always deal terms that can be refined and polished and pulled and pushed, but at this point, I'm very pleased with where the project is, and I'd like to move this forward. I think that we've got a good partner in this regard, and I think it's time for us to follow through completely on the commitment that we've made to our citizens, which are years, and I think in some cases for folks on council, decades in the making. So I just want to offer my support for moving this forward, getting this done, breaking ground, and fulfilling that promise to the community, both fiscally and from a community and cultural perspective here of what we're going to deliver. That's all I have. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Does anyone else have any other comments? Does anyone like to make a motion? And I'm going to see if there are any public comments in just a moment. But any final comments before we maybe move to a motion?
Mr. Mayor, could I say a word? Thank you. And then I'll make a motion if it's all right. I just wanted to take a minute to especially thank the staff, Carly and Wyatt and Carol and everybody on staff. This has really, truly been an heroic effort by a staff which is very able, not very large, so much of what we had to do in this project had to be done in closed session that the public has seen only a little bit of this iceberg. And, on areas of particular concern to me and matters that persuaded me in the first reading vote to vote no, that were addressed towards the end. Very appreciative of that. The composition of the CDA, the membership, the 60% ADUs. What Ms. Hardy said is exactly right. We're committed to housing a full spectrum. It's just that at this particular location, 6 at 60 seemed to be a better use. All the work that went into aligning our project with the county and with Walmatta, the negotiation of a cash in lieu payment for the senior building. A lot of this was groundbreaking stuff certainly for our jurisdiction and even for the Commonwealth. Transportation money that we got. At any rate, I'm wanting to explain to folks why I voted with some skepticism on first reading, but really feel in the past month that we've brought this ship in a very handsome way. And finally, I'd like to thank my colleagues on the council too, each of whom has contributed mightily and uniquely to the final product that we've arrived at today, and especially because so much, as I said, we had to do in closed session. The public will really never know the expertise and commitment and passion that my colleagues on council have brought to this. So with that,
Mr. Duncan, I'm sorry. Yes. I'd like to just interrupt for a minute because I think what we need to be careful of is holding public hearings on these. So I think maybe before we get to motions for each of them, maybe the mayor can call for any public hearing on the two resolutions in the first item, and we can do the public hearings and then take motions.
Understood. Thank you.
All right. So I am this meeting has been open to the public. I'm going to ask the clerk, is there any person wishing to speak on these matters?
Mr. Mayor, we don't have anybody who is signed up to speak, and I just checked our emails and we have received no comment on TR 20-29 or TR 20-30.
All right. So can we now do a motion, or should we wait, City Attorney?
No, you can go ahead and close the public hearing on these two, and then we'll take motions, and then we'll move on to the next staff report item.
All right, that's good. So the matter is closed to the public. Mr. Duncan, I don't know if you had additional comments, but you're certainly welcome to make those and make a motion.
No. I've said my piece. I did want to ask a question, Ms. McCroskey. The TO 2029 and 30 both referred to 15-story buildings. Are we in the explanatory text above? I think we're going to 16, aren't we? Is that okay? Is that within the confines of the language?
I don't believe we're going to 16.
Is that adding the square footage? Does that not take us up another story?
It took us up another story, but it took us on that site from 14 to 15.
Good. Okay.
We can verify, maybe Carly or Robin can verify that I'm correct on that, but that's my understanding.
That's correct.
Okay. I'm sure you're right. My bad. Okay. Mr. Mayor, I move to adopt TR 20-29.
All right. Do we have a second?
Second, Snyder.
Okay. So we seem to have additional comment as well, Mr. Snyder.
I do have just a quick comment. One final question. The phase 2 office building, what's the situation with that in the current final documents?
So the pad for the phase 2 office is set forth in the plans that that the council has been looking at and is prepared to act on. We don't yet have, that office building is not part of this entitlement. It is, but it is part of the land that is now owned by the city council once the additional 0.33 acres from the school board is fully executed, but the school board has approved that. And so those are a few updates on that. Am I answering your question?
You are. I would ask the developer to comment on the Phase 2 office building. What's their intention?
Hi, Councilmember Snyder. I'm not sure, I guess, in terms of our intention, how to answer that well. Our intention certainly is to develop it at a future date. We've already had conversations with the folks at Trammell Crow about possible interest there. And if a tenant were to come who needed more space than the current Phase 1 office building, we may even be back before you to talk about that. So, I think we're sort of focused on the large task ahead of us at the moment, but certainly hope to be talking about that in the future.
The near future, long term, any idea?
Not at the moment. We don't have anyone imminently interested, but, things are constantly evolving. It's very...
And what I heard you say is you're marketing it now.
We're not actively marketing it, but there has been discussion that if someone were to come to us, and we have had some, I would say, early interest from various parties who needed more space than could be provided on the Phase 1 office building alone, someone who might be looking for more of a campus, for example, that would certainly require thought and consideration. And we've been bringing those kind of one-off opportunities and discussing them with the city manager as they've sort of come up, but nothing serious has materialized to date.
Okay, thank you. But you're working on it. That's what I needed to hear. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Just one quick comment. I'd initially preferred the other bidder because they provided more money more rapidly. I was also very disappointed by the several renegotiations on the part of this developer that disadvantaged the city financially, at least in the short and medium term. But the fact of the matter is we're here right now, and I believe we should and must, for the purposes of funding what we need to fund, move forward on this project. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Vice Mayor Connolly?
Thanks, Mayor Charter. Just a quick, just a thought on this one, because it's one more piece that is falling together. So as you all know, I'm fond of talking about the zipper, that we're taking one little step at a time to get this project to the finish line. And these two motions will do that, get us that much closer to the finish line. And it has taken an immense amount of work to get here. Today's August 9th, and we've been talking about this for this specific item for several months now. So I would like to thank everyone for the immense amount of work that's gone into it, and look forward to the next steps as well. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Hardy.
Thank you. So I'm going to just preface by saying that I really liked Robin's analogy about the marriage and kind of requiring that leap of faith. I do feel like in the past 18 months or so that kind of the honeymoon period is over, and clearly we understand all the externalities with COVID and whatnot. And to be clear, I was also one of the biggest fans of this team and the proposal itself, and I clearly we all want to see it succeed. But I have to be honest in that I've been pretty disappointed in the number of changes that we've seen, similar to what Mr. Snyder said, and then the lack of movement and being able to compensate the city for the additional density, the additional usage, the border adjustment that we've had to deal with Fairfax County, and clearly getting more affordable housing. So all that aside, at the end of the day, I think this is still a good deal for the city, and for the sake of keeping it on track and hopefully no more future changes, I will vote for it, but probably less enthusiastically than I have been in the past. So thank you.
All right, thank you. Additional comments from anyone? All right, Madam Clerk, go ahead and call the vote.
Ms. Conley?
Yes.
Mr. Duncan?
Yes.
Ms. Hardy?
Yes.
Mr. Lickenhouse?
Yes.
Ms. Shantz Hiscott?
Yes.
Mr. Snyder?
Yes.
And Mayor Charter?
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0. Thank you.
All right, I'm going to ask the city attorney, as far as the technical aspects, So we had all the matters were put on the table by the clerk at the beginning. Do we need to have specific hearings or open it up to public comment, the remaining items separately?
On these items, I would open and close a public hearing, although we might have done you might have called for comments on 2029 and 2030 together. Is that correct, Ms. Clerk?
That is correct.
So the hearing has been done on these two items together, so you just need to see if you have a motion on 2030 right now. But as we move to the next two items after this, we will need to do a public hearing for each prior to the vote.
All right, so do we have a motion as the city attorney just suggested?
I move.
Mr. Mayor, I move to adopt TR 20-30.
Second.
All right, we have a motion, a second comment. And you've said we've already had, I'm going to ask anyway, is there any member of the public who wishes to speak to these matters? Madam Clerk, is anyone so indicated?
I had checked our email again and we have not received any further comment.
All right, we have a motion, a second. Before we move on, I'm going to just add just a few words. I do want to thank everyone. This has been an extremely long process and taken an incredible amount of time. I think most people can't appreciate the amount of time and effort that it has taken over these past years and how every detail was considered and analyzed and parsed and discussed and considered on this project. And so I would say it may not be perfect, but I think it's much better than many projects could have been, other proposals that we got. And just overall, I think it is a very fine project for the city. And for those who had said we could never build a new school, the city can't afford it, you've seen that by acting smartly and planning and executing, the city to date has put together a project that should go a very, very long way indeed towards financing the school and, as we've heard earlier, possibly offering relief to our taxpayers in the future. So I'm very excited about this project. It's a culmination of so much work by so many people, but I think it's going to be great for the city and continuing our path towards smart growth and development, measured growth that respects our established communities and our community and our values. So I'm very excited about this project. So, Madam Clerk, do you want to go ahead and call the vote?
Yes. Ms. Conley?
Yes.
Mr. Duncan?
Yes.
Ms. Hardy?
Yes.
Mr. Lickenhouse?
Yes.
Ms. Shantz Hiscott?
Yes.
Mr. Snyder?
Yes.
Mayor Tarter?
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0. Thank you. And we are on to TR 21-07.
All right, do we have a motion? All right, well, I guess
Move to adopt TR
really close to getting this approved, but
I heard Debbie. I second what Debbie said.
I got that.
All right. Madam Clerk, do we need to, I'm going to go ahead and open it up to public comment. Does any member of the public wish to speak to this matter?
Nope.
Madam Clerk, has anyone indicated their interest?
No, sir.
Okay, so the matter is closed to the public. Unless there's any other further comment, Madam Clerk?
Ms. Conley?
Yes.
Mr. Duncan?
Yes.
Ms. Hardy?
Yes.
Mr. Lickenhouse?
Yes.
Ms. Shantz Hiscott?
Yes.
Mr. Snyder?
Yes.
Mayor Tarter?
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0. And our last public hearing is TO 21-10.
All right. Ms. City Attorney, do you have advice on this? It's a procedurally, I know there was a little nuances to it.
There are, and the motions are outlined, but I think first what you should do on this one is call for the public hearing, see if there's any public hearing, and then we can move through and handle the first motion, and then just as it's outlined in the section proposed motions.
All right, so this is TO 21-10. I'm going to call for any public comment. Does any member of the public wish to speak to this matter?
We have
Madam
nobody.
Clerk?
We have nobody signed up, and we have no emails.
All right, so the matter is closed to the public. Do we have a motion?
Mayor, I move to adopt TO 21-10.
All right, do we have a second?
Second.
Ms. Hiscott on the second. Any
Can we
further
just-
comments?
Can we
Mr.
just clarify, that's the proposed 21-10 as outlined for the first motion,
Yes.
correct? Thank you.
All right, Mr. Snyder, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I would just say that this is being carried out by the city as part of our part of the bargain, the relationship, whatever you want to call it. And I would just add that I will not be sympathetic at all to any financial renegotiation that disadvantages the city in the future. Thanks very much.
Yeah, I second, maybe not the motion, but I second the thought as well. I agree. All right, so we have a motion and a second. I believe, have I called for public comment on this? I have. No public comment. The matter is closed to the public. Madam Clerk?
Ms. Conley,
Yes.
Mr. Duncan,
Yes.
Ms. Hardy,
Yes.
Mr. Lichtenhouse,
Yes.
Ms. Shantz-Hiscott,
Yes.
Mr. Snyder,
Yes.
Mayor Tarter.
Yes.
That motion carries 7-0.
All right, let's keep going.
So now that we have the proposed ordinance passed, we can verify, I will verify that we have from each of the petitioners a waiver of the 30-day period to withdraw their petitions, and therefore council can move on to the second motion listed on the staff report.
Okay, I move to finally adopt TO 21-10.
Second.
Second.
Hang on just a second. So, City Attorney, did you need to do anything, or you're announcing the verification to us?
No, I announced the verification, and it is included as part of the materials that were posted on Granicus and submitted to council for the meeting. So you can go ahead and move on with the motion.
All right. I'm going to go ahead and ask for public comment. Any member of the public who wishes to speak this matter, you're welcome to do so, but now is the time for that. Madam Clerk, is there any public comment?
Checking one more time, we have no public comment.
All right, so the matter is closed to the public. I wasn't sure, did we get a motion actually just now? I have not yet.
I needed to confirm the second. I heard Ms. Shantz-Hiscott and Mr. Duncan at the same time.
All right, so let's figure out who made the motion.
Ms. Hardy made the motion.
All right, and who made the second?
Give it to Debbie.
Okay.
Anyway.
All right, so we have a motion and a second. Madam Clerk?
Ms. Conley,
Yes.
Mr. Duncan,
Yes.
Ms. Hardy,
Yes.
Mr. Lichtenhouse,
Yes.
Ms. Shantz-Hiscott,
Yes.
Mr. Snyder,
Yes.
and Mayor Tarter.
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0, and we are on to TR 21-23.
I can just briefly, this is the second amendment to the comprehensive agreement, which has really not been discussed, but the only change it contains is the change for the 35,000 additional square feet. So in this amendment, where the comprehensive agreement specifies the amount of square footage for the senior living, the current number is 225,000 square feet maximum, and it will be 260,000 square feet maximum through this amendment. That is the only thing that this does. So this does not require a public hearing, but you can certainly take any, you can certainly ask for any public comment, but that is the one thing that this amendment will do.
All right, I'm going to ask for public comment. Any member of the public wish to speak to this item? Madam Clerk?
No, sir, we have received no public comment.
All right, it is closed to the public. Do we have any questions or comments? A motion?
Mr. Mayor, I move to adopt TR 21-23.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Ms. Hiscott on the second. Madam Clerk?
Ms. Conley,
Yes.
Mr. Duncan,
Yes.
Ms. Hardy,
Yes.
Mr. Lickenhouse,
Yes.
Ms. Shantz Hiscott,
Yes.
Mr. Snyder,
Yes.
and Mayor Charter.
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0. Thank you, Council.
Thank you. Congratulations.
Would we like to take the bylaws for the CDA, which is actually after this budget ordinance, TR 21-26? There we go.
Yeah, let's just bang that out.
And we do have no public comment on this item.
All right. So any additional comment, questions about this item?
Mr. Mayor, Dave Snyder, I just want to confirm that these bylaws have been reviewed, approved, and recommended by the city attorney and by outside retained counsel.
Yes, from my point of view, yes.
Yes, they were drafted by outside counsel, and I have reviewed them, and I believe they've been used for similar CDAs, and they're pretty vanilla bylaws. But yes, we've both reviewed them and approved them.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Do we have a motion?
Move to
Mr. Mayor, I move to adopt.
21.
So Ms. Hiscott on the motion. Mr. Duncan, are you on the second?
Second.
All right. Even though we're not asked to do this, and maybe I already did, I can't even remember, but I'm going to call for public comment. Any member of the public who wishes to speak this matter, you're welcome to do so at this time. Madam Clerk, is there any public comment?
We'll check one final time. And we have no further public comment. Thank you.
All right. So we have a motion and a second. Would you call the vote, please?
Yes, sir. Ms. Conley,
Yes.
Mr. Duncan,
Yes.
Ms. Hardy,
Yes.
Mr. Lickenhouse,
Yes.
Ms. Shantz Hiscott,
Yes.
Mr. Snyder,
Yes.
and Mayor Charter.
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0. Thank you, Council.
Thank you and congratulations. And unless I've misread something, I think that's it for our West End marathon as far as motions and the like goes. So congratulations to the developer. We look forward to continuing to work with you and to have a fantastic project that we'll see come out of the ground in the very near future. And also our thanks to staff who have spent an incredible amount of time putting this together and moving it forward, and for the public as well, and participating in a very difficult and lengthy process and complicated project. But I think it's all the better for that participation, all the boards and commissions and other comments we've received, and our school friends at the school as well. So we've all worked together, I think, as a community to really put together a great project that'll provide benefits for Falls Church for many, many years ahead. So thank you all. And congratulations to everyone. And let's go ahead, unless there's anything else, take a short recess. Let's say 5 minutes until 10:02 and come back and bang out the rest of the agenda.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Robin.
Thanks.
All right. It is 10:01. So we have a few seconds to wait before we get started. Let's see what we got here. All right, so I'm going to wait till 10:02, as I said, and it is 10:02. So let's reconvene and get started and finish up our agenda. I hope everyone's able to rejoin us. Looks like everyone's here.
It should be coming up shortly on live stream if you could confirm.
All right.
Hi. We are back.
All right, welcome back to everyone. Thanks for sticking with us. We are going to rejoin our agenda, which is at, I'm going to let the clerk go ahead and call the next item.
Yes, we have a first reading for TO 21-13, ordinance to amend Ordinance 2026, 2027, and 2032 regarding the budget of expenditures and revenues, appropriating funds for fiscal year 2022 for the General Fund, School Board Operating Fund, School Student Activity Fund, and the Capital Improvement Program funds.
All right, I'm thinking the Vice Mayor may have a statement she'd like to read. Just guessing. If not, I have one I'm going to read.
Unmute myself, hang on. Okay, I make the following statement before City Council's discussion of TO 21-13, an amendment to the FY 2022 General Fund budget. I am an employee of the Falls Church City School Board and am a member of a group of 3 or more persons who may be affected by these matters. I can participate in them fairly, objectively, and in the public interest.
All right, well, I'm going to make a similar one. I make the following statement before City Council's consideration of TO 21-13, an amendment to the FY 2022 budget. My wife's an employee of the Falls Church City School Board, and therefore I'm a member of a group of 3 or more persons who may be affected by this matter. I can participate in the matter fairly, objectively, and in the public interest. All right, with that, let's get on with it. Is this Ms. Bow? Are you going to be talking about this?
Sure, Mayor. So good evening, Mayor Tarter, members of the council. So we have before you the first reading of the first budget amendment for appropriation of a portion of the ARPA funds. Of the 18 million in ARPA funds allocation to the city, the first tranche of 9 million has been received to date. These funds have to be encumbered by December 2024 and expended by December 2026. We've had a bunch of discussions with council and staff for the deployment of these funds in alignment with the eligibility criteria that has been provided by the U.S. Treasury. This process is ongoing as we seek community participation and feedback in the next few weeks. Staff recommends an appropriation of $1,061,000, which is roughly 6% of the total allocation, in order to fund needs that have been identified by staff for near term and priority in the immediate time frame. These funds will be allocated between general government, schools, and stormwater, as laid out in the table on page 2 of the report. A quick breakdown of the $1,061,000 appropriation request is $250,000 for schools for mental health professionals and mitigation strategies to address social distancing requirements, $200,000 for advancing funds for the stormwater mitigation projects, $226,000 for health and human services, initiatives for emergency assistance to the residents, transportation for medical appointments, public outreach for testing and vaccinations in coordination with Fairfax County, IRIS software update and implementation of the SNAP program, $100,000 for speed signs on residential streets to reduce speed limit from 25 to 20 miles per hour, and $250,000 for public communication, technology improvements for remote access and grant administration. That comes to $1,061,500. So there have been no changes since this was brought to council for discussion at the last Monday's work session. So I've kept the report brief, and this concludes my report. Happy to address any questions.
All right, thank you very much. Are there any questions or comments? Do you have any public comment on this, Madam Clerk?
Nothing other than the three folks who spoke earlier in this meeting.
Okay. Mr. Lichtenhouse?
Thank you. So I have a couple questions just about some of the line items here, and I was a little bit surprised I didn't see additional detail on this. Can you guys explain to me, I mean, these are, in the grand scheme of things, of $15+ million, these seem like small line items, but I'm just looking at them even as line items, and they seem like a lot for what's being described. So I just want some additional detail. So for example, if I go to page 2, the public outreach and provision of logistical and interpretation assistance to Fairfax County personnel for testing and vaccination at $100,000. What is that?
I think Ms. Mester had a conversation with HHS. Cindy, would you like to?
Sure. For the item that's for HHS, which is different than the one for Fairfax County, for HHS, it's to help with rental assistance, utility assistance, food assistance, and so forth, the farmers market SNAP, so our vulnerable population. For the Fairfax County outreach and logistics, a lot of that is for testing and vaccination. That would be sort of following up on Colin Brody's comments earlier to Mr. Snyder's question, is to have it available in case, because of spike and increased demand, if there was assistance needed, so we could get specific.
Yeah, but I thought, I mean, he specifically said that resources were not the issue. So like, what are we spending $100,000 on as it relates to vaccination?
And Mr. Shields, I can defer to you, but I think the thought in this case was to have it available, budgeted, because of the challenges of COVID spiking and going up and down, so we could be responsive quickly if it becomes available. If it's not available, then later it could be rebudgeted to another need. Did I capture that correctly, Mr. Shields?
Yeah, I think so. We wanted to have funds if there were things that we needed to do locally that we couldn't get Fairfax Health to do directly, that we would have the resources to stand up, possibly with other partners, as we have done. For instance, we did some vaccination clinics directly with Safeway using their vaccine. And it's a round number, and I'll grant you it's a big number. And so what I would say for all of these immediate needs, we're going to provide very close accounting and monitoring of our use of these dollars. And if it turns out we're not using them, then we will bring it back to council with a report and a request to reallocate it. I think that would be similar for the school allocation, and really probably for many of these. We wanted to have funds available. We are on an emergency footing, and so that was the thinking behind it.
So I understand what you're saying, and I actually, the school part was probably the one that I was most comfortable with, simply because the mental health professionals were something that we discussed even during the budgeting process with the schools early on, and I know that that's a need, and frankly, having 3 kids, we've lived that, so I get that piece. So that was actually the one that I was the most comfortable with. The other ones I just couldn't get my head wrapped around, just in terms of the numbers. And what concerns me about this is that because we have such a large amount, both in terms of proportionate to our total budget, and just in terms of total dollars, that we're starting to line item things. And I appreciate the fact, Wyatt, that you guys are saying you'll come back and let us know if that money isn't needed, but I'd actually rather it be done the other way, which is when it's needed, then we start to allocate it, as opposed to throwing large round numbers at things that may or may not get spent, just kind of get lost in the wash. And I'll go back to, I think, a comment that I made last week and I've made in previous weeks about this money, is that it would be foolish for us to chip away at these funds to use them on anything other than long-term investments for the city. And I'm not saying that we can't contribute to other things that are going to help us navigate what may be an unknown for COVID, but this type of thing, you get these types of line items over, a few months or a few weeks, a few months and over a year, and it starts to chip away at the total amount. And so I'm really not interested in allocating money towards things that we don't have a specific need for. And so the first thing, Cindy, that you had just mentioned, and then working down through news publications, surveys, and digital displays. I mean, that's 6 figures. That's like a full year's salary for somebody in professional services. And then getting down to I had a question on the speed signs on residential streets as well. I'm all for reducing speeding in the city, but am I wrong that we couldn't spend $100,000 in a way that's actually going to permanently reduce traffic? I mean, don't we have the ability from Richmond now to employ devices that would stop people from speeding as opposed to lowering the speeding, the miles per hour themselves? Or can we put additional bodies on the street to actually enforce the speeding that we have now? So I just have a lot of questions around these line items, and I don't like round numbers like this, especially adding up to effectively 5% of the total money that we've received. Because again, I feel like this is just going to start to be a leaky bucket, and the next thing we know, we're not going to have those big dollars to be able to take care of the long-term expenditures, which frankly is exactly where we need to be spending this money. We can always find places to spend money on technology and publications and all these like the nice to kind of make you feel good type things, but that's not where we need to spend this money. And so, I mean, the way that this is written, I don't support it for a number of reasons, and frankly think we need more detail behind these before I'm willing to allocate any money, whether it's going to go sit in a separate fund and then be given back if it's not spent. I just don't like it. I don't like it. I'd rather see us do this in a much more methodical way and on a need-based way with something that's actually going to give us, long-term results.
All right. Mr. Duncan?
Well, I guess in a related vein, specifically on the speed signs, I mean, golly, I'm not going to be the guy who, votes to encourage speeding in the city. It's not where I've lived for the last 36 years, yelling at people running the stop sign in front of my house. But I mean, the enforcement challenge, as Mr. Litkow said, that we have now is, only going to be exacerbated, it seems to me, if we try to lower the speed limit to 20. And I'm just concerned about, setting in place a law that everybody knows that we're going to have a real challenge enforcing. And if we do enforce it, we might develop an undeserved reputation as a speed trap by capturing some of our own citizens. I mean, it is a challenge to drive 20 miles an hour on Broad Street. I mean, I tried it when this thing came out in the packet, and I've got my foot on the brake and I'm going 22 miles an hour down there on East Broad Street. I don't know. I guess on that item in particular, I would like to know a little bit more from the enforcement side of things. And just exactly what is a residential street. I mean, practically every street in the city has got some kind of residential on it, but some streets are more residential than others. There are streets I can think of in various neighborhoods that are windy and narrow and parked in pretty tight. And on streets like that, I guess I could see a 20-mile-per-hour sign making sense. But I'm just not sure that on every single street in the city, or practically every single street, that we need a 20-mile-per-hour speed sign that we cannot enforce unless there's going to be money for some sort of technology or personnel that I don't think ARPA is meant for.
I know others have their hands up. I will just interject that the intent is the local residential streets, which is a technical definition in terms of how VDOT classes streets. And so it would not be on the collectors or on the highways. It would be on the local residential streets. I did want to make that clarification. And we would need to go through the steps of the city attorney is going to lay out sort of a process by which we would be able to do this legally under the state statutes. And so the money would enable it, but there would be more discussion of it before any signs started appearing on the street. And most importantly, the city council would have to pass an ordinance to allow it.
Okay, well, that's helpful to know. That was one of my questions, is what happens if we go ahead with this now? And it sounds like there would be much more discussion and involvement by staff and CACT and others, council included.
All right, Ms. Hardy.
Thank you. So on the speed limit one, is it possible to pilot in a certain area, like our school zones first, so in a limited area of the residential neighborhoods?
Yes, that's a possibility. And so we do need to flesh out exactly what the policy is going to be. We are, as Mr. Litkenhouse probably is criticizing us for, we're putting some money forward before we have these things fully operationalized. And this is one of those.
Okay. So I would support something like that. And if possible, and this will make me really popular, I'd like to see them paired with some sort of speed camera enforcement. So I think clearly enforcement is necessary, right? And so I know that now that the General Assembly has enabled speed cameras, and I think in the past we've talked about piggybacking off of other jurisdictions' ability to, I think doing both at the same time, if possible, would make sense so that we do get enforcement of the new speed limits in those school zones where we have vulnerable kids and staff walking to school. On the point about kind of spending or at least allocating money in certain areas, I think clearly, while we would like to be at the end of the pandemic, we still are not out of the woods yet. And so I certainly have a desire for us to be nimble in reacting to kind of this latest turn of events. And so I am comfortable with putting money against these broader buckets, but would ask that staff make sure we have very detailed tracking and accountability and follow-up and how these funds are spent, as well as coming back to council if we find that we don't need money in certain areas. That feels like a good compromise to me, and making sure that, obviously we want to be fiscally responsible, but I think the importance of being nimble and being able to respond to the crisis that clearly was not done yet, certainly not done with us yet, is important to me as well. That's it.
All right. Ms. Conley?
Thanks. I would agree with Letty, although I hear Ross's point that to put a large round number out there makes me uncomfortable, because we're usually really specific about what we're spending money on. So I would expect that staff would be able to provide us with how those funds, if we appropriate them, are being used, and how they'll be moved around. We definitely need a worksheet that shows us exactly where that money is coming in and going out, which I know we've talked about numerous times. My question relates to Nikki Henderson's request for $20,000 to support the Tinder Hill murals, which I know is on here as a use of unassigned underspending from FY 2021. I'm glad it is on there. And I'm just wondering how that will work. How have we set that one up to get to Tinder Hill?
Well, thank you for that question. And so we have had direct conversations, obviously, with the Tinder Hill Heritage Foundation. They've been planning this project and are ready to execute. It is my recommendation and staff's recommendation that the council appropriation be to the Falls Church Arts and Humanities Council. That is a group that is composed of representatives of the community, and particularly the arts community. And from an accounting perspective, for the use of city funds, I would recommend that it go through that process. I think legally that is the soundest way to do it. And in addition, it is now almost a decade of precedence that the city council, when it has funded arts programs, it does through the council and before it catch, so that you don't have groups coming to you directly to ask for money, but they can be, go through this process. It is because of the description that in it is listed in the ordinance itself or in the staff report, it is targeted for the uses that have been identified by the Tenor Hill Heritage Foundation. So that direction will go to the Arts and Humanities Council, but we're recommending that as the normal process.
Very good. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Snyder.
Sure. Thanks very much. Very good discussion on all of this. Let me ask the city manager, when this, if we approve this tonight and it comes back on second reading, will you be providing significant more program detail on the items that have been mentioned? Because I agree that we want more detail. I do agree, though, that we're still in the middle of a pandemic and that we need to meet the criteria for expenditures. So some expenditures need to be, by the conditions that we're under, relatively immediate, while the vast majority of it ought to be reserved to the extent we can for longer term capital needs. So will you be able to, when this comes back on second reading, for more programmatic detail on the items mentioned? And then I want to address the speed limit in particular. I think if anybody has seen the difference in what happens to a human body when it's hit at 25 miles an hour versus 20 miles an hour or 15 miles an hour, I think you'd be persuaded we want to lower the speed limit. And we want to enforce it. And we want to enforce it with law enforcement officers, and we want to enforce it with speed cameras in school zones. So I think a bit more programmatic detail in that area would be useful as well. But I do think we ought to move forward on all of these. But I would ask the city manager, do you feel you can address the concerns that have been raised tonight on second reading?
We will certainly try to provide as much, we're moving forward on all of these items. We have put them forward with the intent to execute on them. And so in a month's time, we will be able to tell more about them. And I would note also that with that additional information at second reading, the city council could reduce some of the dollar amounts if it's in judgment, if in its judgment the policy rationale or the program behind it doesn't meet a test that you've laid out. And I'll just confirm that with the city attorney that we could reduce the dollar amounts between first reading and second reading. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
So that would be an option for the city council as well if you were to proceed with first reading tonight.
Let me make one more comment on the speed limit. We all recognize that it's a combination of education, enforcement, technology, but if you don't set the basic law and you don't have the basic signage out there, you don't have anything to enforce. And the number one public safety concerns of our citizens has been speeding, cut through traffic on neighborhood streets. And that's exactly what I believe this is focused on, and I think is fleshed out more programmatically, will be an effective response to the concerns that have been raised by so many of our citizens, including one tonight. And I do support moving forward on the Tenor Hill mural project as proposed. Thank you very much.
All right. Are there any other comments or questions as to this matter? Is there any public comment? Mr. Duncan?
Could I just make one other point? I'm going to vote for this tonight. On the first item, public outreach and provision of logistical, et cetera, assistance for testing and vaccination. I don't want to bring it up tonight because we didn't even have time to talk about it with Colin, but by the time this comes back to us again, according to the motion, it would be September 13th. I think we'll know a good bit more by then about how the pandemic is going. And I would like us, well, I would not like us, but I fear that we are going to need to have a discussion about providing some sort of financial incentives or assistance to encourage people who have been vaccine reluctant or logistically unable to get vaccinated to do so. And I'm voting for this tonight, thinking that the language would be broad enough to include the city providing some financial assistance to make sure that every person who is medically eligible is vaccinated.
All right, thank you. Other comments? Madam Clerk, is there any public comment on this matter?
No.
Okay. I do share some of Ross's concerns. I think it's pretty vague and maybe they're just placeholders, but I don't want this money to get away from us. In other words, that it's sort of generally slotted in some box or the other, and then we kind of lose track of it, because this is a very powerful thing. The funds that we've been allocated are just a lot of money and can be put to really good use. And so I want to make sure we're very thoughtful about how it's used. And I know tonight we're talking about kind of putting them in boxes without, I think, fully flushing out some aspects of it. And as has been discussed at past meetings as well, I do think ultimately physical improvements, things that will save our taxpayers money for years and years to come, are where the bulk of our money needs to go. Stormwater that we're doing tonight is a good start, but I think all sorts of programs similarly to that'll save us from debt finance and other things are good ideas. But anyway, that's just my 2 cents. Do we have a motion regarding this item?
Mr. Mayor, I move to grant first reading to TO 21-13, schedule second reading and public hearing for September 3rd, 2021, and advertise the same according to law, with the understanding that more and significantly more detail will be provided before second reading.
All right, do we have a second? Ms. Hiscott on the second. Madam Clerk?
That was Letty.
Oh, Letty on the second.
He's faster than I.
Okay. Madam Clerk?
Ms. Conley?
Yes.
Mr. Duncan?
Yes.
Ms. Hardy?
Yes.
Mr. Lichtenhouse?
No.
Ms. Shantz-Hiscott?
Yes.
Mr. Snyder?
Yes.
And Mayor Tarter?
Yes.
Motion carries 6-1. Thank you, Council.
All right, let's keep going. We're on to the consent agenda. Any comments on any of this? I know we've talked about the mural, which is part of this, or I think it's part of this. Anyway, I'm sorry. Anyway,
The mural was in the budget.
Yeah, I know. I'm sorry. Any comments on the consent agenda? Or do we have a motion?
I move to approve the consent agenda.
All right. Do we have a second?
Snyder seconds. Or
Let's call Snyder on the second. Madam Clerk?
Ms. Conley?
Yes.
Mr. Duncan?
Yes.
Ms. Hardy?
Yes.
Mr. Lichtenhouse?
Yes.
Ms. Shantz-Hiscott?
Yes.
Mr. Snyder?
yes.
And Mayor Tarter?
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. How about other business not on the agenda? Any standing committees? Ms. Hiscott?
Just wanted to mention, since we won't be meeting for a little while, that on Monday, August 23rd, the FCCPS Superintendent Peter Noon is going to have a town hall on updates for Falls Church City Public Schools with the public, and there'll be information coming out. But for those who want to ask all the questions about reopening and what may be happening, you'll want to tune into that on the 23rd at 7 p.m.
All right. Ms. Hardy?
Thank you. I've been fielding a number of questions about the WNOD. Number one, in the fact that the dual trails work has gone on longer than expected. And then second, the crossings agreement we just signed, I think will have an implication that work for that will happen pretty much right after the WNOD actually reopens, hopefully this fall and winter. So it may just seem like the never-ending project. And so I wanted to make sure that the public was aware of that and staff can chime in with comments, because it sounds like there's 4 crossings that will undergo construction in early 2022. And it looks like the WNOD dual trails is wrapping up end of 2021. Is that right, Cindy and Wyatt?
That is correct, and it is unfortunate. And we will be working to have contractual provisions in there where the contractor will go in, work a particular street crossing, and have very tight deadlines to complete it before they move to the next one. So we don't have sort of this, a lingering situation and the contractor disappears for a couple of weeks, and like we sometimes see. So that is how we will try to manage that. And but it is something that we're aware of and wish we could avoid it, but it appears that we're not going to be able to avoid it. The long construction period.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Duncan?
I noticed somewhere that the census number for the city was going to be released Monday week. I wondered if that's true, or if we have an early line on what our census number was.
I have not seen it. I will look that up and get that information out to council.
Okay. One other thing. Hey, thank you. A citizen mentioned the other day to me that the light at Cherry and East Broad was short cycling for the traffic on Cherry, not letting even a reasonably normal number of cars through on one cycle. And I know there was some water main work over there today, so things may have been especially screwed up, but just wanted to ask if somebody could check to make sure the traffic signal is performing as it's meant to.
We certainly will. We'll follow up on that.
Okay, other comments? White, how's the library grand opening coming?
So the library, we are waiting temporary certificate of occupancy from the city building department. We expect to get that early this week. That that is coming later than we initially planned, and so some of the moving in process has gone slower than planned as well. So we will be meeting together with the team tomorrow and expect to have an update for the community and for the council. I'll get it to the council first and the library first in terms of what the schedule is. The team is working very hard, to get everything unpacked and ready to welcome the public in. But that's been the issue that we've been dealing with. Fairly minor issues relating to fire safety, but people are not allowed in and books aren't allowed in the library until those pass all their final inspections.
So when are we anticipating all that?
So we'll have an update for the council tomorrow. The ribbon cutting was planned for August 20th. We have pulled that date, but we'll get a date out to the council and library board and the public. I think we'll decide on the next date based on the status of the certificates of occupancy after tomorrow's meeting.
All right, thank you. Other comments or questions from anyone? Okay, well, listen, we got a big case banged out, a lot of good work on council for a long, long time. So I would just say congratulations and thank you to all of you. A lot of great work in getting that done. But anything else, any final words anyone wants to say before we adjourn?
Are we going to make any decisions about meeting plans before September 13th or before?
I think we're having a mayor's meeting on the 18th, and to discuss that.
Okay, all right.
Any other comments, questions? All right, well, listen, we won't be seeing each other, at least in this forum, for a couple weeks. Everyone enjoy the rest of the summer. And I think we've been a very productive, council this year. And I think getting that case approved was pretty big stuff for us. So congratulations, enjoy the time off, and we'll be having our mayor's meeting on the 18th. So unless there's anything else anybody wants to say, I would suggest we adjourn for the evening.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
All right, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, council.
Everyone.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Good night.
Stay safe.
Good night.
Stay safe.
Bye-bye.